Imagine a guy with zero skills and absolutely no magic, living all by himself up in the mountains because 2 years ago, his girlfriend named Arya dumped him for a real talented hero, which triggered him to travel the world on his own, defeating countless monsters along the way, and becoming incredibly strong without even realizing it. Now, he finally returns to the city, stronger than any hero out there. The story kicks off with a lost little elf staring down a massive dragon. Terrified, she starts screaming in desperation, but our main character arrives just in time, casually saying hello to the dragon and asking it to chill for a second. He explains the girl probably wandered in by mistake, so there's no need to get mad, but the furious dragon warns that now he's going to devour both of them. He charges at the beast and lands a single punch, leaving the dragon completely defeated on the ground. Sienna, the little girl, was totally shocked, wondering how he just took down an S-rank monster like that. He introduces himself as Wazoo and helps her down the monster-infested mountain. While they were chatting, he sensed an arrow flying toward him from a distance. Using his insane reflexes, he catches the arrow just in time and shouts for the shooter to show themselves. An adult elf appears holding a bow, and Sienna starts screaming for her not to attack, explaining that this guy saved her from the dragon on the mountain. Solona, the elf who fired that shot, was still pretty suspicious, but since Sienna is alive thanks to him, she invites him back to the elf village as a way to say thanks. When they arrived at the massive village, all the elves were shocked to hear he lives on that mountain alone, but Solona, being the village guardian, still didn't trust him one bit. The elves showed him around their fruit forest, and when he picked the first fruit to eat, everyone tried to stop him because he grabbed the only poisonous fruit that could kill him instantly. He totally ignored them and ate the fruit anyway, leaving everyone dumbfounded that he was still standing. Solona looked him over, wondering how a guy who beats dragons doesn't have a single scar. She waited until nightfall to get some answers, sneaking into his room and checking his guild card to find out who he really is. The card stated he was a 16-year-old human, but she saw something else that raised her suspicions even more. So, she decided she would tell everyone the next day. The next morning, Wazoo woke up after a long night's sleep, and Solona called him over for a chat. She told him she knows his secret, that he hasn't updated his card in 2 years, and the reason must be that he's a wanted criminal. She apologized, but as the guardian, she has to keep the village safe. Wazoo said it's fine, but she's got it wrong because he isn't a criminal at all. To avoid bringing up all the memories from 2 years ago, he decides to just leave, saying his goodbyes to the other elves. She felt a bit bad about being so harsh, but it had to be done. After walking for a while, he sat down and started thinking too, realizing he was getting way too sentimental about things. Suddenly, 2 elves came running in his direction, screaming that the village was under attack by Gazuna, a guy trying to become the new guardian. They begged Wazoo to go back and save Solona. They rushed back as fast as humanly possible, arriving just in time to help her out in the battle. Gazuna, consumed by revenge for being treated differently than everyone else, activates his power and summons every single monster he controls. Wazoo tells them to chill out because he'll handle this guy. Looking back, he takes a deep breath and stops the giant monster's charge with just the palm of his hand. Solona stood there in total disbelief, watching how a simple human with zero magic could effortlessly take down all those monsters, realizing he's easily the strongest man she's ever seen. Gazuna was also baffled by how easily his monsters were destroyed, especially since every single one of them was rank B. With no time to think, Gazuna immediately throws up a protective dome, sealing the area to duel Solona without Wazoo being able to interfere. Then, desperate to prove his true strength, he swallows his own magic orb and transforms into a massive, powerful monster. He charges at her at high speed, but Solona manages to dodge at the very last second and drives her sword right into his neck. But that wasn't enough to stop him, and with a single punch, he knocks her flying. Squeezing her neck, he tells her she's about to be just another pathetic dead elf, and that everyone in the village is going to witness her end. Suddenly, Wazoo throws a punch that shatters the entire dome into pieces. The monster calls him a bastard and asks why he's trying so hard to save her. Wazoo replies that he just really didn't want to watch her die, and without hesitating, he lands a massive punch right on the creature's face. Still worried about Solona, he runs over to see if she's okay, but the monster attacks him by surprise, catching him totally off guard. The creature uses all its strength to try and crush Wazoo, but suddenly, an arrow strikes it right in the back. It was Solona, who takes the monster's life with that final shot. Lying on the ground, Wazoo realizes he feels something he hasn't felt in years, and it scares him. Remembering that the last time he felt this he ended up betrayed, he decides to run away. Later on, she sat in a tree wondering why he took off without saying a word. Her friend shouts out, letting her know Wazoo forgot his guild card. Since the card activates with the owner's blood, she puts a drop of her own blood on the card, and even though the card wasn't hers, it actually activated. Surprisingly, the card starts talking to her, asking what she thinks she's doing. This freaks her out, because the card is giving off a divine presence. Seizing the moment, Salona tries to investigate Wazoo's life, but the card refuses to answer. She threatens to throw the card away, and the divine voice finally caves in, but it begs her to never let Wazoo find out about this conversation. It all started 2 years ago, back when he was still living in a big city, but he preferred spending his time just outside the walls with his girlfriend Arya. One day, she finally said the words he'd been dying to hear, "Let's get married." It was the happiest day of his life since he'd always wanted this, and after so many rejections, the moment was finally here. But a year later, his girlfriend was summoned to go on a journey with the heroes. Wazoo chased after them, desperate to go along with her, but the main hero stepped in and stopped him cold, telling him he was way too weak to tag along and honestly not even worth their time. In that moment, our protagonist made a serious decision. He was going to get insanely strong by the time Arya came back. Another year went by, and rumors started spreading that the heroes were returning. He and his sister Kagane were totally hyped up by the news. Without wasting a second, Wazoo ran out to see Arya after all those years. The whole city was partying to celebrate the heroes' return, and right there among them was Arya, walking alongside the group. Wazoo finally made it to the crowd, and looking up, there was the woman he loved so much, standing next to the hero leader. And then, the scene that absolutely destroyed his world happened. Arya was kissing another man, right there in front of the entire city. Completely devastated, Wazoo turned and ran without looking back. At that moment, he decided he couldn't stay in the capital anymore. For him, there was no life left there. Every memory he had with Arya had turned into pure pain, and he felt like he'd see her face everywhere in that city. Later that same day, his sister searched the entire house for him, but after checking every single room, she realized he was gone. And that is exactly how Wazoo's great journey began. Walking aimlessly, with a hollow chest, and absolutely no purpose in life. And after that, Wazoo started making his way aimlessly until he ended up on the mountain he was already familiar with. Sometime later, Wazoo was on that icy mountain from before, saying he can't take another step and will probably die. Falling into the snow, he remembers all the things that happened before. That mountain is famous for having many strong monsters, and they say an elite group of knights would have trouble killing them, and Wazoo accidentally stepped into this place. However, at that moment, a strange little creature appeared. Looking at the protagonist, it realizes he was being swallowed by the snow. At that, the little monster tries to remove some of the snow and warm him up. Suddenly, Wazoo starts talking, saying he needs to eat something. I don't know why, but this little dragon has a backpack and taking out some very suspicious food, hands it to the protagonist. The poor guy had no choice but to eat that slop, and even thought he was going to kick the bucket. However, he couldn't forget that he didn't go there to be killed, especially not alone. After fainting a little later, Wazoo opens his eyes, realizing he was still alive. And, to make matters worse, there's literally an S-rank monster on his head. In fact, it's just a little dragon that had saved him and seemed to really like him. A few minutes later, Wazoo walked around the place and didn't find any strong monsters, but he wanted to find at least something to eat. So he walks around the place, finds mushrooms, and even a bone that he eats. I don't know why. Since he's very hungry, everything he eats seems really good, so he has to do his best to kill some monsters and level up. A boy takes a card, and with a curious dragon, he says it's a card called a guild seal that even shows his status. It's proof that he's an adventurer, and as far as he remembers, his strength is around 1,500. Suddenly, a noise comes from the card, and someone asks if Wazoo can hear them. Everything will be fine, and he's sure he'll find a lot of good things on his path from now on. After all, he has it there. Wazoo again asks whose voice it is, and the card says that before he forgets, he has to remember that it had given him its blessing, so he must accept it. Apparently that card is kind of a goddess, even I'm not quite understanding, and to support, the kid's status changed everything, and instead of numbers, there are now words. But things get more interesting, right? Because he also gained an ability that, just by eating something at a higher level than his, he could gain more levels. Wazoo, however, seems to be as dense as a drum, because he still didn't understand anything. Thinking that's why the food was so good now, and after eating some mushrooms, he looks again at that card. It seems his abilities were changing little by little, and Wazoo supposes this might be some kind of error, because if it's not, it's a very overpowered thing, and then the goddess asks how strong he was planning to get. If he keeps using this bizarre devourer ability, he'll become stronger even than a goddess, and hearing this, Wazoo doesn't believe it. To be honest, he hasn't encountered any monster since he got there, and the goddess says it's because they're scared of the aura he's emanating. Suddenly, a giant creature appears saying that's where the little dragon was. Man, now it's bad. The creature's mother showed up. The dragon is surprised to see a human on the mountain, ordering him to disappear quickly, or else he'll have to face King Ragnar personally. In this, it calls for the little dragon, and Wazoo tells it to stop because she saved his life in the first place. Grabbing the monster by the tail, he throws it far away. The cave is really strong. The creature falls to the ground not understanding anything, and Wazoo, surprised, asks if it's okay. Neither the dragon nor the protagonist understood how he did that. A little later, it seems everything was resolved, and the dragon says that the little one is called Mir and is its daughter. She also seems to want to know the world outside. Man, there were 2 big dragons there, and Wazoo says he never imagined dragons could be so similar to humans. Then he wants to know if that is its castle, and the black dragon responds that yes, and it also doesn't seem to have a place to call home. If he wants, he can use it whenever he wants, and Wazoo, thanking, apologizes for causing so much trouble. The dragon says he's incredible because not even its flames scratched him, asking if he's sure he's human, and the protagonist says he's at least 88%. Anyway, it wants to know if the boy is a hero and if he doesn't have to go on an adventure with his companions or something like that. However, he says it's not like he has a goal or anything like that. Ragnar asks why he doesn't go defeat the demon lord if he has all that power and even conquering a world isn't an impossible dream. Hearing this, our boy falls silent, remembering what he had seen in the capital before, saying that all he wants now is just a friend. If he had someone who supported him from the bottom of their heart, then he would return to the place he grew up, where he has so many memories, which is the royal capital, but now he's very scared, and even the thought of approaching that place makes him tremble. But if one day you have a precious friend you can trust and end up meeting the hero again, you won't be as frustrated or sad as you are now. The 2 surprised dragons say that he had been through a lot, but it seems that his daughter really liked Wazoo. If he's leaving the mountain and going on a journey now, then he'll entrust Mir to him. With that, he's sure he'll naturally find true friends. At this point, the story finally returns to the present, with the goddess finishing telling everything to Salona, saying she really did something quite cruel to Wazoo. She can't even imagine how painful it was to lose the friend he loved to another man right before his eyes. Before, she said a lot of cruel words, rejecting his feelings in front of many people, as if it were a public execution. However, to be honest, she really wanted to accompany the protagonist. Nevertheless, she had promised her parents she would protect this forest, but other elves appear saying that if that's the case, she shouldn't worry. As she was acting a bit strange before, he went there to see her and ended up hearing the whole story. Salona asks what she means by what she said, and the girl says she should be more honest with her own feelings and that the village isn't so weak as to need her protection all the time. Sienna also said the same thing before, and she has no choice but to become part of the protagonist's harem. At this point, the other elf asks her to take good care of the card. It's her own choice whether or not to join the guy's harem, but she won't lose anything just by returning the card to him. After all, it's something very important to Wazoo, and hearing this, the girl is already more motivated, saying she'll go after the protagonist. Starting to leave, she thanks them for everything and will leave the rest to them. The 2, seeing the girl leave, the guy there asks if Salona was like that before, but the elf says she's sure the only thing she thinks about now is Wazoo. She thinks she doesn't know what this suffocating feeling is, but the only thing she wants is to know more about Wazoo. After getting to know him better, she's sure she'll know what this feeling is. Before, she promised her parents she would protect the forest, but she's sure that if they were alive now, they would definitely want her to do the same, asking Wazoo to wait for her. On the other side, the poor protagonist was trying to enter a city, but obviously, he can't. There's no way they would let a suspicious person enter the city without identification. Wazoo says he's been through a lot, and all he wants now is just a bed and also to eat a little. But boy, life isn't easy. Ichud was sidelined, and even so, he finally arrived at the strong city called Linik. It's been many days since he left the elves' village. To be honest, he doesn't know exactly how he got there after everything, but he still remembers Salona. After all, he was rejected once again. Still, it's expected, right? Because he kind of asked her to go with him shortly after they met. At this point, Mir tries to help the protagonist, but he says it's all right now. He'll have to try to get closer to them before inviting them next time, because a harem isn't something so easy to make. First of all, he has to do something about the guild card he lost, and obviously, he won't go back to the elves' village. To make matters worse, after arriving in such a big city, he can't even enter. Wondering what he should do, when he looks to the side, he finds a little girl who is running from something. Boy, there was literally a giant mammoth behind her, and to make matters worse, the girl was heading towards Wazoo. Calling the little girl to come closer, he lands a punch on the mammoth. The beast already lay down without sleep, and Wazoo asks if she was okay while not believing the protagonist had defeated that thing alone. Thanking him for helping, she asks if he's a traveler and, as a thank you, wanted him to stay at her inn. Our boy, however, says he can't even enter the city because he lost his guild card, so he can't accept her help even if he wanted to. At this point, the little girl says he can get his guild card again and just needs to compare the data registered in his hometown. But as life isn't easy, he needs to pay 5 gold coins, and obviously the kid doesn't have that money. The girl says that this is really bad because she would like to hire someone as strong as him to be a security guard for her inn. Then Wazoo asks if this city is so dangerous, and she replies that the inn is full of adventurers who want a good night's sleep after some mission or just to have food. However, in a short time, some people with bad behavior have been causing problems and think they own the place just because they are strong. Hearing this, Wazoo asks if she wants his help because, if that's the case, it's no problem. With the girl accepting, she says she will try to convince her father he is really strong, so she should leave the rest to him. Her name is Lula, and I already didn't like that name, but she is the poster girl for the inn, and will also inherit it in the future. With Wazoo introducing himself, everyone goes back to the entrance again, and I want to see how Wazoo will manage to get in. Man, I don't know how, but the kid found a way, and even he couldn't believe how, since he has no criminal record, and they confirmed his registration in the city of Iskola. He has permission to enter with a temporary pass, and must do his best to thank Reagan. Not understanding anything, Wazoo asks who this guy is, and the girl replies that it's her father, who owns the inn and makes a lot of good food. A little later, the girl says that he will get his card after showing his worth, so he has to do his best. And Wazoo, hearing everything, asks what he has to do for now. Then she says that her father will give him a task that he could take if he were in a guild, so he just has to rest for today. Wazoo asks what she means by this task, and the little girl says it could be defeating monsters or solving some other problems, and he certainly won't have a problem. Currently, he is an F-rank adventurer and certainly won't have the best rewards, but if he rises in rank, obviously things will improve, allowing him to do much more and even create a group. Suddenly, the girl gets all excited, asking to visit her inn when that happens, and Wazoo, not being an idiot, thinks that was the girl's intention from the start. Changing the subject, he asks about her work at the inn and if she will focus all her time on management. But soon after, another person appears, asking if Lula brought another guest, and I already said I don't like that girl's name. Then she apologizes because a giant creature followed her and the guy there saved her. Thanking the protagonist, the girl says he arrived at a good time because her husband is cooking, but the poor guy just wanted a room to rest. She, however, says it's all good and he doesn't need to think about the money to pay. A few minutes later, the kid was in the tavern eating, seeing that there are a lot of adventurers. There are some girls there that can't be rejected. Wow, the guy doesn't let one go, my boy. He is certainly taking his plan to create a crazy harem seriously and was even imagining how smooth life would be just enjoying it. Suddenly, he is surprised because the food is really good, but the other table didn't think the same. Apparently, they were acting rich, wanting to taste the commoners' food to remind themselves of how high their social position is. The protagonist thinks those are the rude people Lula talked about, and since they already gave him a room, he will solve this whole problem. However, boy, the little girl already appeared there, saying not to mock her father's food. The guys continue with insults, saying her father will have to learn to cook again, but Lula says it's a lie because her father's food is the best in the world, and suddenly someone throws the bowl, saying it's all ridiculous. Gerald in the back was watching the mess, and the annoying extra asks if he wants to get involved and doubts anyone would have the courage to do anything. Since they are A rank from a group called Black Blaze. The little girl was still all nervous, saying she doesn't care, asking them to apologize to her father right away. Then the guy just gets angrier, and when he was about to do something, the protagonist appears. The man asks who he is, and Wazoo replies that he's just an F-rank adventurer. Then the extra says that if that's the case, he will teach him something interesting, because people like that definitely won't have a long life. Man, out of nowhere, the guy goes aggressive, using a knife on the protagonist, and the funniest thing is that it broke on its own. Everyone is surprised, and the guy asked what kind of ability he used, but now Wazoo was running out of ideas, throwing one of them out the window. The two won't get away easily, and soon everyone was already outside the cave. The MC was looking at them calmly, and the guy with the scar on his nose says he has some special ability, but as long as he knows what it is, he'll win easily. Out of nowhere, the guy summons a fire spell in the middle of the city and sets Wazoo on fire. After the chaos, he asks if he now understands the power of an adventurer, and as the dust settled, Wazoo was there, unfazed. The guy wasn't understanding anything, but he charges at him once more with everyone at once. Wazoo quickly releases everyone, saying that kind of attack clearly won't work on him. In that moment, when one of the extras falls to the ground, he ends up bumping into the little dragon. The poor thing had its food taken away and now fell into the puddle of water. While the other extras were still talking to Wazoo, the little creature was furious. They shouldn't have messed with its food, and it sets everyone on fire. Wazoo, however, tries to stop Mir, saying he's going to burn the entire area, and meanwhile, the poor guys in the corner had already turned to charcoal. A bunch of people from the guild were watching the fight, and everyone was congratulating Wazoo. Lula also thanks him, saying it was nice that they got what they deserved. Wazoo, all friendly, changes the subject, saying that the food his father made is really good. Soon after, the girl's mother says she hopes they've learned a lesson and won't show up there again, although I found that unlikely to happen. Meanwhile, there's someone in the alley observing the protagonist, saying he has incredible strength and is really handsome, supposing maybe he could lend his power. Soon after, a flashback appears to the time when Wazoo was in the elves' field, saying he never thought he'd find so many good things, and Salona asks if he's sure everything is okay. Our boy says that if it's because of that crazy fruit he just ate, it didn't have any effect on him. Meanwhile, Salona was nervous about something, and looking to the side, suddenly a giant lobster appears. The girl asks everyone to return to the village because she'll hold it off alone, but Wazoo says he can't leave her behind in a situation like this. She tries to convince the protagonist to leave, but he, of course, is going to stay, telling the lobster to come at him, and Salona asks why he's provoking it, because they just need to buy some time until the village elves arrive. Wazoo asks if by any chance they won't defeat them, and Salona says she'd like to do that, but obviously it's not that easy. Suddenly the lobster grabs the boy with its claw, but he was calm, saying that was crazy. While holding the monster's claw, Salona says that even so, that creature is very dangerous. But man, the boy tore the little creature apart easily. Now I see it's not a lobster, but a scorpion that stings Wazoo. The funniest thing is that it didn't work on the boy either, and Salona just watches everything without understanding anything. Suddenly the scorpion goes after her too, but the protagonist protects her. Then the elf asks, right, why he did that, but then the scorpion simply falls apart. A little later, everything was already resolved, and all the elves were surprised they managed to defeat that big creature with just the two of them. Everyone wants to know what kind of magic the boy uses, but he's just a human, right? Back to the present, the protagonist was at that little girl's inn. Waking up Wazoo, she says she was really impressed with everything she saw before. The kid had simply taken out that group in the blink of an eye, but meanwhile, Wazoo thinks he didn't do anything. Mir had simply set everyone on fire, yet Lula says she saw how strong Wazoo is with her own eyes. Changing the subject, she asks the boy if he remembers the reason for coming to the guild today, and he says it was to do a mission where they could make his guild card again. Then, the girl says, right, that the guild leader was eager to meet him, so he has to do his best. She really wanted to accompany him, but she needs to get more food for her customers, and assures him she won't be caught by another monster again. In exchange, someone else will pick him up, and soon after, a girl will take care of the protagonist. How about that, huh? She says her name is Emma, and she is the receptionist of the Adventurers Guild. Our hero gets all embarrassed, saying she is very beautiful, and Lua says she will leave the rest to her. At this point, Wazoo asks why the guild receptionist is there personally, and she replies that it's because the guildmaster is summoning him. His fight with the Black Blaze group yesterday is an interesting topic, and that's why the guildmaster wanted to meet him. In that case, he has to change his clothes, so she offers to help him, but Wazoo says he can dress himself. But the girl doesn't care and starts taking off Wazoo's clothes, much to the boy's dismay. A little later, the boy is already dressed while walking through the city talking to the girl. He thinks that walking with a beautiful girl early in the morning is too much for him, as he has never had a girlfriend in his entire life. Then, Emma says they've arrived and that this is the Adventurers Guild of the city of Lilac. Now they go to the master's room on the top floor, and Emma asked him not to stare too much while they climbed the stairs. Meanwhile, Wazoo looks around, noticing that there are a lot of different people, and even demi-humans. Suddenly, Emma starts panting, saying she rarely climbs stairs. Wazoo takes a quick glance and then thinks it's a bit annoying to fall into this temptation by looking now. A few minutes later, they finally arrived at the guildmaster's room. The protagonist takes a look, and the guy is in that typical pose. Then the man thanks him for showing up because he was waiting for him. His name is Reagan, and he is the leader of the guild in the city of Limerick. At this point, Wazoo already gets the idea of what happened because that guy is literally the father of that little girl. Then, Reagan thanks Emma for bringing the young man there. Changing the subject, He says he learned about the whole situation because of Lula and Kayla. First of all, he really wants to thank him for saving the two, and right after, Wazoo asks if he is really Lula's father. The guild leader responds that Lula is his daughter, and Kayla is his wife. The protagonist, however, can't believe it because his wife and daughter are very beautiful, and it was probably from a previous marriage because this guy is quite ugly. But the bald guy there says that Lula is his daughter and he married Kayla because they loved each other, so he has to be careful with what he says next time. Still, our little boy doesn't believe it because this idiot has a wife while he is alone. Oh, the boy is suffering. To make matters worse, this man is the owner of the inn. However, his life kind of ended before, so he really has nothing to lose. And soon after, the guild leader says he has lived quite a harsh life. Changing the subject, the protagonist says he wants his guild card back, but Reagan says he didn't call him there just because of that. Thanks to him having taken down the Black Blaze group, there is no one taking on their mission and he is not blaming him, but the reason he called him is that he wants him to replace them. Our hero says he is only at rank F, and the leader says he knows that, but he has the power to take down a ranked group and come out unscathed. Obviously, this job is perfect for him, right? And even being young, he tamed a dragon, and Wazoo, not understanding anything, asks what he means. At this point, Reagan says that about 2 weeks ago, a merchant traveling on the road saw the shadow of a dragon on the mountain. So far, there are no victims, but he can't guarantee that the dragon won't attack humans, so he wants the boy to find out everything about it, and, of course, if he can, he wants him to tame it. Wazoo says he doesn't know if he can get along with a dragon just by taking Mir with him, but since it's dangerous, he will do it. Soon after, Reagan thanks him and as a reward will give him 30 gold coins, and then he gets all excited, right? The boy is an aristocrat. If anything happens, just beat up that scary dragon, and the guild leader says if he's so confident, he'll leave the rest to him. Then Wazoo just asks for a map, stating that everything else would only get in his way. Reagan says he can get one from the receptionist, and Wazoo, calling the guy bald, says he'll go there. Meanwhile, the guild leader was still bothered by something. It's not possible that this boy took down the dragon with just one punch. The only thing he can do now is wait eagerly for the report. A little later, the protagonist had finally gotten his map, but he also needs food. Mir has certainly become popular after yesterday's incident, and people calling him a dragon tamer is quite strange. A few minutes later, Wazoo was at that inn from before, and Kayla asks if he just found out that her husband is the guildmaster now. However, the kid doesn't have time for chit-chat and leaves, thinking that Kayla is really a kind person, but unfortunately, she's taken. Suddenly, someone bumps into the boy, and with her apologizing, Wazoo wants to know who this person is. Observing the situation, he asks if she's being chased, so she needs to hide quickly. Entering an alley, the people outside, meanwhile, were looking for this girl. In this, Wazoo says that somehow he was feeling something strange from those guys. Anyway, she's safe and can leave on her own, and then the girl asks if he's the man who defeated the ranked adventurers. Wazoo says it was just his dragon that took out that group, and he's just an F-rank adventurer. Soon after, the woman says he has an interesting name, and removing her hood says her name is Tata. At some point, she has to repay her debt, but Wazoo says that after this, he has to kill a dragon. In this, the girl is surprised, right? The kid is literally going to kill a dragon with those little pieces of equipment. But Wazoo says that anyway, he's going back to the city, and Tata says she'll thank him later. However, for the boy, it doesn't make a difference, saying that just being able to know more about her was already great. Anyway, he has to be careful with those bandits until then. The girl, surprised, asks why he went so far for a stranger, and he says it doesn't have any meaning, and she just has a lonely expression on her face. The only thing he wanted was not to leave a person with that kind of expression alone. In any case, he'll do his best to return as quickly as possible, saying he'll see her later. The girl, looking at the protagonist, smiles, saying he's a really strange person. A little later, some random knight comes across our hero. Introducing himself, he says his name is Orlando, asking if he doesn't remember that he was the one who interviewed him at the gate. Changing the subject, he questions where the guy is going, and Wazoo, with surprising naturalness, responds that he's simply going to kill a damn dragon. In this, right, the guy gets desperate, saying he at least needs to take a sword or a spear, but Wazoo ignores everything, saying that since he's leaving the city of Linux, he has to return the temporary pass. Orlando says his dragon might be strong, but he's really asking to die fighting a dragon like that, and he at least needs to form a team. However, our boy had already left, and the guy says he at least has to believe that this kid will come back alive. A little later, Wazoo was getting closer to the mountain, saying it's still very far. According to Reagan, there should be a small mountain by that lake. Anyway, they shouldn't keep talking and should head to that blessed place. However, the little dragon couldn't take it anymore. He needs to eat something. Wazoo puts the food bag on the ground. The dragon raises its little arms, and suddenly the bag disappears and then reappears. I don't understand anything anymore. Wazoo, seeing this ability, is surprised, saying he didn't know he had that, and asks if by chance it's magic. Besides being such a cute little creature, it has this storage ability and thinks he can't live without it in the end, and maybe she'll have to be his bride in the end. A little later, Wazoo was walking through that place and, looking at the sunset, says, "It's wonderful." The world is certainly very big, wondering where he can find someone who will be his friend forever. Anyway, they finally arrived at the right place, assuming Reagan was talking about that blessed mountain. However, there's no dragon there, and looking to the side, he comes across a cave. Getting closer, he wants to know if by chance that blessed dragon is there. In this, the guy enters the cave, right, saying there's still no one there, and suddenly, a giant creature appears asking if he's not Wazoo. It's not possible that her husband told him to go there, and if that's the case, he has to mark his words because he will definitely never return. All of this even if it's the protagonist's request, and then our hero is surprised because she is literally the mother of his dragon. Next, the protagonist becomes desperate, asking her to calm down, questioning what she means by this whole story and if they had some kind of fight. She says it's much worse than a fight and has decided to leave him forever and return to her birthplace. Wazoo asks if she was raised in that area, and the dragoness responds yes and wants to know if the protagonist came there because of Ragnir. At this point, our hero says he only came to investigate a rumor about a dragon he heard in the nearby town, but he never thought it was her. So now he just has to give a report to the guildmaster saying it's not a violent dragon and the case will be entirely closed. Soon after, the dragon mother calms down, saying she shouldn't have gotten so embarrassingly angry. Changing the subject, Wazoo asks why she returned to her hometown. After all, the castle on the mountain is her home. She then says it was all her husband's fault because when she was at home with lots to do, he simply cheated on her with a young dragoness. The protagonist gets furious at that moment because it's unbelievable that this guy cheated on such a beautiful wife. Out of nowhere, the dragon mother asks if he knows about dragon beauty. The protagonist responds that he does because he's sure she would be quite beautiful if she were human. Anyway, that's why she returned to her hometown and called her mother to discuss it with her, and now she's just waiting. Understanding the whole situation, Wazoo asks if there's any chance they could make peace. The dragon mother says it's not impossible as long as he apologizes, and Wazoo asks if she's discussed it with him properly. However, she says it doesn't matter why he cheated, and Wazoo thinks there probably isn't any definitive evidence that it happened, saying he will bring Ragnir to this place, then they can talk calmly. Besides, this will calm the townspeople, and when talking to Ragnir, if she doesn't want to be alone, she can stay there supporting as well. Hearing this, Mel says she can do whatever she wants, and since it's his request, she doesn't have much choice but to meet him. Soon after, the protagonist says the castle is a bit far, so he wants Mir to stay there. Anyway, leave the rest to him and try to rest a little. Running towards the castle, he just observes without saying anything, saying he is a truly kind man who will never leave someone in trouble alone. A little later, Wazoo finally arrived at the blessed castle looking for Ragnir. Looking ahead, the poor guy was literally lying on the ground. Getting closer, our boy asked if he was okay. The dragon gets up desperately, asking where Mir is, and Wazoo says a lot has happened, and she is now with her mother because Mel left her home because her husband had cheated on her. The dragon, however, says he obviously never did back, asking where Mel is now. Wazoo says he can tell him that, but he wants to know what he will do when he finds her. Ragnir will certainly find a way to bring her back, and Wazoo asks how he will apologize to her. But for him, a dragon king shouldn't apologize, and the only thing he has to do is ask her to come back soon, and that's more than enough. Soon after, the protagonist says there are already enough problems between the two of them, but this time, it's a private issue between husband and wife. To start, he wants to know who he was cheating with, and the dragon responds that he didn't do it, and the person with him is named Karel, a female dragon with a beautiful body. Her beauty is quite popular with other dragons, and she has tried to invite him to eat something several times. Since his friends were there too, he couldn't simply refuse, but he swears he never did anything at all. At this point, Wazoo says it's obvious she would get mad, and he certainly enjoyed flirting back then. Still, for Ragnir, it doesn't explain why simply a dragon king has to apologize to her, and Wazoo asks him to set that title aside a bit, imagining the possibility of Mel going out to eat with another dragon and getting quite close to him. But Ragnir doesn't even let poor Wazoo finish the sentence. But lastly, he asks if he would really forgive her if that happened. The dragon says that probably not, and that he would be bothered by it, and Wazoo says that's exactly what she was thinking. Anyway, the reason for going there was to tell him where Mel is, and Ragnir asks if she will forgive him if he ends up apologizing. The protagonist says yes, as long as he promises not to accept any more advances from that female dragon and apologizes with all his heart. Moreover, he must make sure to take good care of her after making peace. With everything resolved, Wazoo asks to stay there overnight because he walked all day just for his sake, and Wagner asks how his harem is, and Wazoo says he still only has Mir by his side. Surprised, the dragon says he wonders how a guy like him, who understands so much about women, can't find a single love, and Wazoo asks not to discuss it, because talking about this kind of thing will only make him feel bad in the end, and Ragnar says that if he were a dragon, he would surely be quite popular. Then, a day passes, and finally, the moment arrives for Ragnar to apologize to his wife. Suddenly, Wazoo picks up the dragon, saying that this way is much easier than flying, and asking him to prepare, literally launches Ragnar through the air. You can only see the poor dragon's little star disappearing, and Wazoo says that this way he will surely get there before him. Anyway, he forgot he had told Mel he would be there with her as a witness, so he needs to get there quickly. A little later, the protagonist arrives at the cave asking what happened. However, man, things don't seem to be going well there. There are literally 3 dragons now. Trembling, Wazoo thinks that Wrinkled Dragon could be the female who flirted with Ragnar, but soon after she says he has a lot of courage to treat her daughter that way. Ragnar, calling her mother-in-law, says it was all a misunderstanding, and the old lady asks why he didn't go to apologize immediately. Probably can't apologize without the help of that human, and also heard a lot about him. Facing the protagonist, she smiles, and he asks if there's something wrong. The old dragon says she now understands why even she can't see the limit of his strength. And Mel, changing the subject, says she had planned for Wazoo to marry Mir after she grows up. However, Ragnar gets furious, saying he hasn't accepted that idea yet, and his mother-in-law later says she never let him raise his head. Her name is Megal, and she is the former dragon queen. And meanwhile, Wazoo thinks he knows it's Ragnar's fault, but he seems quite sad now, so he has to find a way to resolve everything. Asking what they know about this betrayal incident, Mel says she already knows the whole story, but isn't mad at him about it. She just wanted him to come and apologize to her in the same way. Hearing all the chatter, Wazoo is surprised, but then says they are very selfish, asking if they can't just make peace already. But first, he wants to talk to Ragnar a little. A little later, the two are outside the cave, and Ragnar asks what he wants to do now. Wazoo wants to know if he has already apologized to her, and the dragon replies yes, but now his pride is in tatters. Then our hero says that from now on, he will have to find a way to please her. Ragnar asks if he has experienced this kind of thing, and Wazoo says of course not. It's just what his father used to say. Anyway, he wants to know if there's any high-class restaurant for dragons or something like that there, and Ragnar replies of course not. Asking what he's planning, Wazoo says that in moments like this, humans take their partners to a restaurant to eat good food, and it's an easy way to please them. Then, the dragon at least understands, asking if this kind of thing exists in human cities. And Wazoo says yes, but it's kind of hard to take giant dragons to such a small city. The dragon, however, says if that's the case, there won't be any problem. Soon after, the two return to talk to Mel again, saying he truly regrets the problems he caused this time. His mother-in-law asks what he will do, and Ragnar says he will refuse any contact from that dragon from now on and will surely create a distance by introducing other males to her. You also cannot forget to take better care of Mel so that your relationship becomes stronger. As a way to apologize, he wanted to invite the two to a place, a human city called Linik. Hearing this, Mel becomes very happy, saying she never thought her husband would become such a considerate person. She definitely wants to visit this city, and the other dragon says it's been a while since she spent some time with Mir. In the end, it might not be so bad to let her old body rest. With everything resolved, she says it was a good treatment for such an idiot like him, so he should never forget this feeling. With everything resolved, Wazoo is happy but asks how they will manage to enter the human city. You know what's coming next, right? The old dragon there says they aren't just any dragons and can transform into humans easily. A light begins to shine on the dragons, getting smaller and smaller, and suddenly the creatures turn into humans. At this, the protagonist becomes all embarrassed, saying he was sure those two would be very beautiful if they were human. Then, Megal asked to be shown the way to the city of Linik. However, Wazoo was surprised by something else because his little dragon hadn't transformed yet. On the other side of the city, Salona was still searching for Wazoo, saying it's been 10 days since she left her village, wondering where the protagonist could be. It's not possible that this kid left the elf village on a ship and arrived at a place like this. Anyway, he must be in trouble for not having his guild card, and she wanted to deliver it to him as soon as possible, but she doesn't know where he might be. Not far from there, there's a big city, and if he's not there, he probably could have gone to another continent. If they could meet for the second time, she wanted to know if he would invite her on a journey too. Wow, this girl is in love with the MC, always together in their adventure and also in their daily life. Maybe they could enjoy the nights to talk and get to know each other better. At this, Salona gets all nervous, right? Saying there's no way this could happen. Besides, Wazoo could find other companions and build his harem if that were the case. In the end, she might not even stay in the boy's heart, much less have the right to stay by his side, because she previously rejected his feelings. There won't be another chance to join his harem after all this time. Man, I'm not understanding anything anymore. One moment this girl wants to join the protagonist's group, and the next she doesn't. To start with, Wazoo probably forgot about her, and now she's just getting more worried. Right after, she hears two people talking, and there was Lula with some other guy. It seems she was getting food for her inn again. Starting to leave, she says she'll come back there again tomorrow. Passing by the elf, she suddenly hears a strange noise. At this, the little girl realizes right, Salona was starving. Since there were some leftover breads, she offers them to the girl, saying she always takes a few and her father never complained. Hearing this, Salona accepts, but at least she has to pay. And Lula says if that's the case, she should stay a bit at her inn. Not wanting to brag, that's where the best food is made, and Salona, hearing everything, says it doesn't seem like a bad idea. At this, the two introduce themselves, right? Saying each other's names, and Lula asks if she is an elf. Upon saying yes, the girl gets all happy, because there are a lot of people who pass through her inn and almost never saw an elf, and Salona says her race generally never leaves their villages. Lula asks why she came to this commercial point, and Salona says it was to look for a certain man. In that case, the little girl offers help because there are a lot of people who pass through her inn every day wanting more information about this person. Then Salona gets all embarrassed, saying he is cheerful, very kind, and also quite strong, but somehow there's something about him that makes her want to protect him. Also, she can't forget that the kid is really handsome, even though he's a man. Hearing this, Lula says nothing, and then says she was at least expecting to hear about his appearance or some characteristic, I don't know. Salona says he basically dresses in black and also has a little dragon resting on his shoulder. Hearing this, Lula asks if by any chance this dragon is named Mir. With Salona responding that it is exactly that, Lula asks if by any chance she was looking for Wazoo. In this, the elf is surprised, right? Asking how she knows that name, and the girl responds that he is staying at her inn. Then, she said that he lost his guild card and is currently working with her father because of that. Hearing all this conversation, Salona feels relieved that she was seriously thinking they might never see each other again, and Lula says if that's the case they should go to the city of Linux soon. Changing the subject, she asks if she walked all this way just to deliver the card to the protagonist, and she replies yes because she would probably be in trouble without it. However, Lula says that as far as she knows, the elf village is a bit far from this place, asking if she used some kind of travel ability to get there. Salona responds that she just walked, and surprised, Lula says she must really love Wazoo, but Salona says she's not entirely wrong and just isn't ready to join the boy's harem yet. She probably met someone else, but the girl says Wazoo is currently traveling on his own alongside Miyar. Hearing this, Salona gets all happy, saying she's only saying that to make her happy. Soon after, Lula informs that Wazoo left the city because of a job her father gave him, but she will always be welcome at her inn. Meanwhile, Salona was standing there wondering what to do because she suddenly got very nervous, wondering if Wazoo will accept when he returns, because if that happens, they will travel alone together. Then her heart starts racing, right? The girl is in love with our boy. A few minutes later, Lula says they are almost there, and looking ahead, she finds a group. Boy, the protagonist was with them, and Salona just takes a quick look. Turning her back because she was embarrassed, she notices there were also a few more people with him. Basically an old wrinkled woman, a guy with spiky hair, and a girl. Since he's already with this group, he surely found new companion. In the end, it's no surprise this happened, right? Because he is very reliable. Soon after, Lula asks what she's doing because she has to meet Wazoo soon, but she replies that it's all fine. After all, she went all this way just to return his guild card. By the way, she has other things to do, asking Lula to deliver the card for her. Soon after, she leaves without even talking to Wazoo. Not understanding anything, Lula wonders what happened with Salona. A little later, Salona wants to know why she ran because the only thing she has to do is talk to him normally. Said it should be quite simple because she just wants to apologize and ask if she could join the group. However, she wasn't even able to do something so simple, wondering why she acted like an idiot with him near her. This makes her very nervous and at the same time lonely, wanting to know what this feeling is. And yes, my friends, that's called love. Man, until now, she hasn't realized what it is. But let's see what happens, right? In this, she says she realized this before, and probably has a crush on the protagonist. Wow, I bit my tongue now, huh? A few minutes later, in the guild hall, Reagan was having tea, asking if she really wants him to believe this story. To summarize, the people in front of him are basically the Dragon King's family, and Wazoo says he knows it's a bit hard to believe. Soon after, Megal says this conversation isn't going anywhere, asking Ragnir to transform already. Downstairs, you can only feel a tremor, and upstairs, a giant silhouette was watching the guild leader. Ragnir showed his true form, and now I want to see Reagan not believe them. In this, the protagonist says he is looking forward to the rewards he was promised before. Changing the subject, he asks if he knows any good restaurants nearby. A few hours later, everyone already left the guild, and Wazoo says it seems Reagan will personally guide them in the city tomorrow. Getting closer to the Dragon King, he asks him to do his best to please his wife. Anyway, they should stay at the inn he's at tonight, and suddenly, boy, Lula appears saying she met an elf named Salona. She had gone to that place to deliver his card, and Wazoo, taking it, remains silent, asking if by any chance Salona is still around. A little later, the Dragon King's family was walking around the city. There's a lot to see, so they had to find a way to pass the time. Meanwhile, there's someone who hit a shot on a plush toy man, and it turns out the old lady is really good at shooting. She says that humans really think of some interesting things. Mel says she's going to try too, but the poor thing can't even keep her eyes open. Shooting at the teddy bears, she can't hit any, and the attendant calling her says she can keep that prize as consolation. Suddenly, Megal looks to the side, noticing there's a really big building there. Shortly after, Emma gets closer to Taylor, saying she can never show this thing to them, since Mel and Megal were nervous because Hagrid had betrayed her. Hearing this, Kayla tries to change the subject, asking to go to a more interesting place. There's no chance of telling them what that building is because it's actually the most famous brothel in this city. A few minutes later, everyone was at a table eating a lot of food. Reagan asks if the dragon's current body is similar to a human's, and Wazoo says the only thing missing now is clothes, so he needs his help to find something that could make Mel really nervous. In any case, he's going to leave the rest in his hands, and with that, Ragnir starts trembling, begging not to be left there alone. However, Wazoo says he has to stop depending on other people, and also that he was the one who started this whole story. Everything will definitely be fine, and at that moment, Kayla and Emma are helping them with everything they can. So, probably when they get there, they won't be nervous anymore. Then, Reagan asks if Wazoo had taken his guild card, because he's going to help him register again, asking to go to the association tomorrow. That shortly after, the protagonist leaves the restaurant, happy that his card is back, but he's thoughtful about something. Even though Salona came from so far away, she simply didn't want to talk to him. So, she probably hates him. Suddenly, that crazy card starts talking again, saying that he thinks too much about Salona while completely forgetting about her. The goddess asks if he's not happy to see her again, and responding that he is, asks to tell what happened with the elf. With that, the goddess changes the subject, asking if Wazoo made any new companions while he was away, and Wazoo says he's just their guide because they all have their own problems to solve. Hearing this, the goddess says that Salona really misunderstood everything, and Wazoo, not understanding anything, asks what this story is about. The card, however, changes the subject, mentioning that it seems even in this city there are some bad people. Back at the restaurant, Mel and Megal were already eating, seeming quite happy with the food. With that, she thanks, and the old lady asks for another plate of meat. In the end, she's going to forgive him for forgetting everything, since he gave her such a luxurious moment like this. It was her mistake for not understanding anything, and she should have trusted more, since he's not the type of person who would lay his hands on a female dragon. However, she got nervous at the moment, but it's obvious that if she sees him doing the same thing again, she won't forgive him. The two hug, and the next day, Wazoo was there at the guild's door. The kid was really sad because she had said she would earn 30 gold coins, but there are only 5, and then she says, right, that the guild master asked to reduce it. 10 coins to pay for the Dragon King's party, another 10 for lodging, and 5 for food, and the MC, surprised, can't believe they went there without a penny in their pockets. The girl says that not only bad things happened, since her rank went up from F to C, so now she can take on missions with higher rewards. Even so, it wouldn't be a surprise if her rank went straight up to S, because she's someone who can literally handle a dragon on equal terms. Under normal conditions, she should take a test after moving up to rank C, but since she's quite strong, they could overlook it. She also can't forget the fact that she now has the guild card again, so she has to take on a lot of missions. With that, she changes the subject, right? Saying that the guild master said he's going to take him to an interesting place tonight as thanks for the help yesterday. Hearing what she said, our hero doesn't understand anything, and Emma says he probably already knows where it should be. A little later, Wazoo had already returned to the inn, saying he's going out with Reagan today, so he wants to leave Mir with her. Kayla suggests leaving Mir with the residents who rented a room next to hers. The Little Dragon group will stay there for a while, and Wazoo, very stressed, says that this is what Emma was talking about regarding that accommodation fee. Everyone thanks the protagonist for his help, and for now, he accepts this conversation, saying that Reagan is waiting for him, so he's going for a walk. However, the Little Dragon doesn't want to leave him, and Wazoo says he won't take long, asking her to stay there. A few minutes later, the MC was walking around the city asking where they were going, and Reagan says not to worry because they're going to the entertainment district. I can already see where this is going, huh? There are several places there that might offer a bit of fun, if you know what I mean. Wazoo, thinking he's being taken to drink, already apologizes because he can't handle much, but the guild leader says there's a lot to do. This is as a reward for safely completing the investigation mission, and therefore, he at least has to introduce him to 1 or 2 girls to spend a bit of the night. The place they're going to is practically the best brothel in the entire city. At this, our boy trembles, saying not to involve him in cheating on his wife, but Reagan says of course he won't do that and just wants to visit the owner. Since he's a companion from when he and Kayla were adventurers, and besides, after his 15th birthday, he's already considered an adult, and he's 17. So he has to stop playing dumb and admit he's used that kind of peculiar service before, but Wazoo, all shy, says he really never has. And Reagan says that if he's never visited this kind of place before, he probably hasn't matured. This guy doesn't miss a chance, poor boy. He's already lost hope. A few minutes later, the two entered the inn, and Reagan says he brought the boy. Opening the door, a guy in a suit appears, saying they arrived quite early. Introducing the MC, the guild leader says he was the kid who came out unscathed after a fight against some rankers, and the same one who can face a damn dragon on equal terms. The guy in the suit says he's heard many rumors about him, and his name is Garrett, the owner of this place. That, asking them to come in, he asked what's wrong with the protagonist, and Reagan says that kid had never been to a place like this before. Sitting on the sofa, Garrett says he can choose any girl he finds pretty, and there are plenty of them of various types, but the MC was trembling with embarrassment. With the owner asking if he's not a man, or if he's bad with women, Wazoo remains silent, thinking only of Salona. Suddenly, someone appears, saying they're talking about interesting things. At this, the man says she's the most beautiful woman in his house, and she says that if it's okay with the protagonist, she'll be happy to accompany him. Seeing who it was, our boy can't believe it because it was the girl he met before, and she's happy he remembered. The owner asks how they met, and she says Wazoo saved her when she had a problem shopping, and Garrett says it's surprising she's interested in clients. However, she says they become much closer. Wow, this conversation is taking a different turn. The MC was trembling, and the little princess there asks if she's not that pretty, and Wazoo, red as a pepper, says that's far from the case. The boy is so embarrassed that he drinks water like crazy, and Garrett asks if everything's okay, and the girl replies she heard Wazoo is quite strong. Suddenly, the poor MC chokes and falls to the ground like a stone. A few hours later, the Blessed One wakes up with a massive headache. Looking up, he sees a somewhat peculiar view, and man, the girl was there with him. Now I want to see. With a somewhat suspicious smile, she's happy he's awake, and Wazoo, trembling, asks what he did, and Tata says he passed out after drinking a bit. After handing him a glass of water, Wazoo asks where they are, and she says they're actually in her room. As for Reagan, he left a long time ago after asking them to take care of him. Soon after, the MC apologizes for everything, but Tata says it's okay and she's used to it. Changing the subject, she asks how he's feeling, and with the boy saying he's fine, suddenly, man, she was just as she came into the world. Wazoo's inexperienced self asks what she was doing, and she says she's preparing for work so they can get to know each other better. That's how this place works, and the protagonist, however, was just thinking he wants this mess to end soon, and it was like I said, the meat only falls on the vegan's plate. A little later, Tata throws herself on Wazoo, saying she can do whatever she wants, while he thinks he's not ready. Just go for it, kid. It's yours. At that moment, the MC says they're moving too fast, and Tata apologizes because she never thought he wouldn't be interested in women. However, Wazoo says that's not the case, and just wants to get to know each other better, so he can't offer his body so easily. Covering her with a cloth, he states that she must value herself since she's someone so beautiful. Hearing this, the girl starts laughing, and the MC asks if he said something strange. Then she says it's the first time a client said something so strange in a brothel. He's a very strange and kind person, so now she feels a bit bad for trying to deceive someone so honest. To be honest, she saw him defeat that group at the inn before and kept pestering Reagan to introduce him to her. Then Wazoo is surprised, right? Asking why she did that, and Tata says she wanted some of that strength too. The MC questions if it has to do with the people who followed her before, so it's much more serious than he thought. If that's the case, there's no need to worry, just leave the rest to him, asking who he has to defeat. Hearing this, Tata wants to know if he doesn't want a reward, and Wazoo says not to worry because he doesn't need money. However, of course, she doesn't want to reward him that way and hasn't repaid him for the previous help. Then, Wazoo says he already mentioned before that he can't leave a person with a lonely expression alone, and that's how she is at this exact moment. Soon after, Tata is left speechless, all embarrassed. At that moment, she asks if she really seems lonely in his eyes, and since he can see that, it makes her feel a bit embarrassed. BMC smiles and then asks if he can know about her story, and she says yes, but only if he tells his afterward. To be honest, she's in this place to pay off her father's debt, and Wazoo assumes the people who followed her are the loan sharks. Tata responds that yes, because they are very dangerous people and don't hesitate to use a bunch of people to kidnap her. That's why she hopes to place her hopes in the protagonist, and even now her mother and father are doing their best to get the money. Even if it was just to help a little, she ended up deciding to work in this place, and hearing everything, Wazoo says he's going to have a little chat with the loan shark. However, Tata says he can't pick a fight with this man, no matter how strong he is. After all, if that happens, he probably won't be able to stay in this city anymore. She definitely can't cause him problems, so she won't ask for anything more than his protection. So she's going to find a way to pay off her father's debt with her own hands, but even so, they won't let her go so easily. Asking for his protection, Wazoo just observes silently. At that moment he says, right, that he won't get in her way, but when she feels in danger, she has to call him immediately, no matter where he is. Because in the end, he'll arrive immediately to help her. Oh boy, I can already see this is going to be the first of the harem. You can see she's really serious about this decision by looking into her eyes, so he'll support her with everything he has. Hearing this, Tata just gives a smile, thanking the protagonist. Changing the subject, they ask why he became an adventurer and if there's something he wants to do, and he says he wants to at least create a harem. The girl says she's sure he'll manage to do it quickly since he's a very good person, and Wazoo says he's heard that story before, but he's still alone to this day. At that moment, she says it straight to his face, right, asking if she can be the first person to join his harem, and I knew this was going to happen. Hearing this, our boy is surprised, but she says it's obvious she's joking because he wouldn't want a dirty woman like her. Wazoo says that's not true, and Tata says she thought so because he's a very kind person. Soon after, she asks what they're going to do now since they don't have much time to spare. The protagonist asks to talk more about the places in the city, especially about good restaurants and beautiful spots. Then time passed, and the two were there talking. A few hours later, it was already daylight, and Tata wakes up. Looking around, she was still in the room, surprised that absolutely nothing had happened. From start to finish, the protagonist hadn't done anything. The boy was there in the corner, even drooling in his sleep. At that moment, Tata remembers what the protagonist had said, because one must value oneself since they are such a beautiful person. She was still quite surprised because this was the first time she met someone who cared as much as she did. A little later, our little boy finally woke up. Looking around, Tata was no longer there, and there was only a little note. It said for the boy to come there again because she wants to hear more about his stories, and the protagonist says he feels happy that she had fun, but anyway, it's time to return to the inn. Suddenly someone called out to him, saying that just because he spent a night with Tata, he shouldn't get full of himself, because there's no chance his sister would take a nobody like him seriously. Hearing this, Wazoo feels down, saying that she is really right, and the girl is surprised that he doesn't even try to deny it. Anyway, he should never come back there, but the protagonist says he can't do that because Tata herself had said to return later. Looking at the letter, the girl is surprised, saying that this is rare. After all, her sister was giving attention to an idiot like him, and throwing the boy out of the establishment, she just tells him to leave. Wazoo says there was no need for all that aggression, and the girl says she knows the owner said he is very strong, but that doesn't mean they can trust him easily. Out of nowhere, she starts speaking in the third person, saying that Nenya is the only one who can protect her sister from those bad guys. A little later, Wazoo had already returned to the inn, but since he returned only the next day, Mir was very upset. Wazoo says he just didn't return for one night, and it's not like he did anything strange, yet it's not possible that she was jealous. But he gets his answer right away when Mir starts scratching his face. Apologizing, the protagonist says they should eat something good, and a woman named Tata had recommended some interesting places. Suddenly, someone calls for our hero, and boy, Tata was there again. Surprised, Wazoo says he didn't expect they would meet so soon, and Tata says she's doing some shopping. The one by her side is her bodyguard, and her name is Nenya. The protagonist greets her, but she doesn't pay much attention. At that moment, he is now sure he is really disliked, and soon after, the girl calls for the little dragon. Picking it up, she asks if she can play with it later. Then she can take the idiot beside her to carry her shopping. Hearing this, Wazoo doesn't understand anything, and Nenya tells him to be quiet since she wants to get closer to her sister. I really appreciated this girl. Bidding them farewell, now it was just the protagonists with Tada. The girl says her sister was probably just trying to give them some time alone. Anyway, they should take a walk then. Earlier, she was thinking of doing some shopping and getting some things for the other girls at the mansion. To be honest, she can't spend much, but all of them are very good people to her, so she wants to show a bit of her gratitude. A few minutes later, the two arrive at a jewelry store, and Tada says that small shops like this usually are more careful with their work and have some very unique things. The girl continues to look at the items, but the protagonist notices something because someone is watching them from an alley. Wazoo gives a stare, and suddenly Ketchup just comes out from the back. At that moment, Tada asks what was happening, but the protagonist asks her to stay there for a bit. Heading towards the alley, there were a bunch of people there, and Wazoo asks what they want. Wanting to know if they are loan sharks, the other guy responds that he really doesn't know anything. Now that that fierce girl is no longer there, it will be easy to catch Tata. The protagonist, however, gives the guy a kick that sends him spinning like a Beyblade. Everyone can't believe what happened, but they also quickly lie down without sleep. The protagonist was there in the corner, his vision saying this is a hassle, and suddenly someone in the alley says they understood everything. I heard from the owner and others that he was really strong, but it's much more than she expected. Hearing this, Wazoo asks if she was testing him with those guys, and Nenya responds that yes, because she needed to see if she could trust her sister to him. Of course, she planned to save her if anything happened, but it seems she didn't need to do anything. Even so, she's quite surprised that the kid defeated those guys in a matter of seconds. Soon after, Wazoo asks if she trusts him now, and Nenya says that as much as she hates to admit it, it's clear how much stronger he is than her. She also wanted to find out if the boy is worth enough to hear the whole truth. To sum up, Tada's debt is just a lie created by the town's boss. For all these years, he tormented Tada's family with this debt that never existed, and in the end, demanded an absurd amount she could never pay. All this just because this disgusting man desired Tata from the beginning. Soon after, the scene shifts to Mir, who was quite downhearted. Mel says she really loves the protagonist, and Megal says that in the end, Wazoo stayed out all night, even after saying he would return soon. Hearing all these complaints, Ragnar was quite angry and then calls his daughter to take a walk around the city because he will buy her anything she wants. Hearing this, Megal says it's very unfortunate to see a father trying to get his daughter's attention just with gifts. His wife says it's true, and even if he gives a bunch of presents, he won't regain respect as a father. However, the dragon says he just wanted to try to cheer her up a bit, but Mel asserts that if that's the case, he should find another way to do it. A little later, Ragnar was walking around the city and suddenly meets Reagan. Sitting down to chat, they ask about the protagonist because he didn't return last night. A few minutes pass, and Reagan tells the whole story, and Ragnar says he then took him to meet this Tata. For Reagan, this is the most dangerous moment for her, and he's sure that if Wazoo is protecting her, no matter what kind of person attacks her, she will always be safe. The Dragon King says that's true, and it wouldn't be a problem with Wazoo's strength. After all, he's the man his daughter acknowledged. Even so, he's very angry because he went on an adventure alone with his daughter, asking if he can imagine her being downhearted just because the protagonist isn't there. Even trying to cheer her up, he ended up being completely ignored, and in that, his wife and mother-in-law started nagging him too. Hearing this, Reagan says he doesn't have much to say, but he also has a daughter, and the more he spoils her, the more his wife scolds him afterward. Anyway, daughters definitely grow their own wings, and while that doesn't happen, they can't do anything but do their best to spoil them and hope they like it. Suddenly, Ragnar says he also knows that feeling, and, since this moment won't last long, they should enjoy it a lot. In that, even though one is a dragon and the other a human, it seems they had formed some kind of friendship somehow. A few hours later, the two were at the bar drinking heavily, and Ragnar says he can't believe a human was understanding so much. Suddenly, our hero appears there apologizing for the delay, asking where Mayar was. Ragnar, nervous, tries to say something, but suddenly Mir appears hugging the protagonist. While hitting him, Ragnar can't believe what's happening. Wazoo tries to ask Mir out to make up for the mistake, but she's still hesitant. Leaving through the door, Reagan says that his daughter was definitely smitten with the protagonist. Soon after, Lula appears saying it's time to prepare dinner. Greeting Ragnar, he can't believe this is the guild leader's daughter. In that, the girl says she'll help make dinner today, so if the Dragon King wants, he can go. Hearing this, Ragnar is over the moon because all his bad feelings are going away, begging to be able to spend time the same way with his daughter. The next scene returns to the present, with Wazoo going to that jewelry store from before. Tata asks what's going on and where he went. Since he's acting as her bodyguard, obviously, he can't leave her alone. Getting closer, he asked her to never do that again. The protagonist was quiet, feeling that weight on his arm, but then says she doesn't need to worry anymore. After all, he will always be by her side. Wow, the boy is getting bold now. Hearing this, Tata is happy, thanking him for those passionate words. Suddenly, the goddess starts speaking in your mind, asserting that Tata is definitely hiding something. She is indeed in debt to the lord of the city, but it's all false, and to protect Tata, her parents are doing what they can. In this situation, the girl also took an absurd measure, which was to sell her body, but at least she gained some allies. Even now, everyone is doing their best to gather evidence about the debt. They are getting closer to finding the truth, but of course, the lord of the city won't just stand by. After all, he is frequently sending mercenaries after Tata, and that's when the MC steps in. The man who made her suffer did something unforgivable, and since that's the case, he will help Wazoo. Shortly after, the attendant asks if they want anything. Presenting the shelf, she says there are a lot of products for couples, and Tata, hearing this, becomes very embarrassed. Wazoo notices that too, so the girl asks if she can at least seem like a normal person by holding his arm like that. In this, our hero doesn't understand anything, since she is a normal person. However, there is a difference because she is more beautiful than most, and Tata, even more nervous, says that's not the case. Starting to remember everything she did in the past, the poor girl had a tense life just to pay a debt that doesn't exist. In the past, she thought her heart had died for selling her body, but she felt something at that exact moment. Looking at the ring there, the girl seems to have liked it a little. Then the attendant says there is a phrase written on it. On the man's ring, it says he will protect her, and on the woman's ring, it says she has eyes only for him. Hearing this, Tata falls silent, wondering if someone as tainted as she could make such a wish. There's no way around it. The girl is head over heels for the MC. Shortly after, she calls Wazoo, asking him to put that ring on her. A few minutes later, Tata thinks this is very strange because when she's next to Wazoo, she feels like a girl in love. Shortly after, she asks if she could do this as a gift to Wazoo. It doesn't have any particular meaning and she just wants to thank him for being her guardian, but the MC says he usually fights more with his hands. At any moment, he might end up breaking it. So Tata says if that's the case, he should wear it only when they meet again. In the end, she doesn't want to hinder him in his battles, and Wazoo says he will definitely wear it when they meet again. Tata says that's a promise while wondering how she could do something so embarrassing. A little later, the protagonist had taken Tata to another bodyguard. Saying goodbye, she thanks him for the ring, mentioning they will see each other again someday. A few hours later, the protagonist was back at the inn, wondering why Mir is so irritated. She points to the ring and punches Wazoo in the stomach. At this, the Dragon King gets angry, saying that if Mir weren't so stressed, he would have punched him in the face himself. He had exchanged rings with a girl named Tata, even after winning over his daughter, but Wazoo says he just received it as a gift. Ragnar says he doesn't know what will happen because they might end up getting close if he continues being her bodyguard, and hearing all that, poor Mayar just gets more nervous. Shortly after, Majel says they should just believe what the protagonist said. But if it's a lie, no matter how invincible he is, he will gather all the dragons and use maximum power to punish him. Our boy, trembling to his core, says he doesn't even want to imagine that, and then says he has a little gift for Mir. She has always been helping him until now, so he had to find a way to repay her. Receiving a necklace, the little dragon even cries. Our boy asks if she didn't like it by any chance, and Majel says he shouldn't worry because she was happy with it. A little later, it was daytime, and Wazoo was waking up. The poor guy was all sore because Mir wouldn't stay still while sleeping. When he goes to get up, suddenly Ima appears asking where the protagonist is. Entering the room, Wazoo was underneath her, seeing a very interesting view. Emma asks what kind of punishment he wants, but the boy wasn't understanding at all what he had done wrong. A little later, the girl was explaining the situation to our hero, saying that a poisonous swamp appeared out of nowhere inside the Linux forest. So far, they haven't had any losses, but if they don't resolve this, the city of Linux will be affected too. Iwazu says that must be why she is looking for adventurers who have resistance to poison. Poisons have no effect on him, so he doesn't have to worry, and Ima asks up to what level he can nullify. However, the boy has resistance to literally every type of toxin. Surprised, Emma says he is truly a monster. But anyway, this time the mission is to search the poisonous swamp. A few hours later, Wazoo is at the city gate saying that the place he is going to is supposedly very strong in terms of poisons, so he can't take Mir with him. It would be bad if something happened to her, so she should stay in the city waiting for his return. Soon after, Mel says that there's no way a poisonous swamp could have appeared out of nowhere, so there's probably something asking the boy to be careful. Meanwhile, Ragnar was quiet, saying he has a bad feeling about all this. In that case, he should take him too. And the surprise protagonist asks if he is immune to poison, and the dragon asks not to be underestimated. He completely understands that he is strong, but it's okay to rely on him at least a few times, because after all, he is the Dragon King. But Wazoo says it doesn't matter what he says, because in this form he just looks like a useless father. Hearing this, Ragnar just ignores it, saying he always wanted to have an adventure with the protagonist and can fly through the forest very quickly. Returning to his true form, he asks if it won't be much easier this way. Having no other choice, our boy ended up agreeing to travel with him, heading towards the blessed swamp. Megal, watching from afar, says there's no way a poisonous swamp could make the air like this, and not just anyone can do that. So, for sure, something really bad is approaching. The next scene goes to an alley in the city with those adventurers the protagonist had troubled before. If the dragon wasn't with him, they would have certainly killed him, and the other guy says it's just a rumor, but it seems Wazoo is a dragon tamer. Meanwhile, a hooded guy is approaching the alley man. I can already see that nothing good will come of this. Getting closer, the man says the orb keeps improving, and right now he can obtain its powers without any side effects. The adventurer asks who he is, and the guy replies that he is merely a merchant, asking what they will do if he tells them that the invincible adventurer from the rumors also has this red orb. In fact, he himself also has this item and was thinking of selling it for a high price in the city, but he felt bad for them. In that case, he will give them a discount, asking if by any chance they don't want power. No, if they have this, they will be strong enough to even defeat the Dragon King. Somehow the guy ends up convincing the adventurers, and they buy this blessed pearl. Thanking them for the purchase, the hooded man then asks if by any chance they know where the city lord's mansion is. On the other side of the kingdom, there was the protagonist arriving at the poisonous swamp, saying the smell is horrible even from up there. It's as if the purple miasma's poison is trying to corrupt the entire forest, but still, he has to find a way to enter. With Ragnar descending to the ground, he says that if the forest is only this size, just his fire breath should be enough to solve the problem. However, Wazoo says that if he turns this into a wasteland and burns the whole place, it would be quite sad, so for now, they will just look for the source of it. Hearing this, the dragon is surprised, realizing that our boy is really quite calm and wanted to know where he gets so much confidence from. Anyway, this is the perfect chance to return to human form to observe him closely and see what his true strength is. As they walked, Ragnar asks if Wazoo really doesn't feel anything with all this miasma because even he is getting a little uncomfortable. Certainly, small animals wouldn't last a second in this place, but he has quite an interesting adaptability. Anyway, he wanted to know where his strength comes from. However, the protagonist is also not sure about that, and all he knows is that after Mir saved him from the brink of death, his body started showing some peculiar changes. He doesn't know if it was because of the food Mir brought him or because of the goddess who appeared out of nowhere inside his guild card. At this, Ragnar asks if he had any kind of wish when he was dying, and Wazoo replies that the only thing he thought was that he didn't want to die. At that moment, he just wished that his life wouldn't end like that of a pathetic die. He never had any kind of training and was literally starving at that time, so he was putting everything he found into his mouth. Even now, his status keeps changing every time he eats strange things, but he's not sure if he can call it getting stronger. And hearing this, Ragnar says he has lived for several centuries, and this is the first time he's heard a story like his. From everything that has happened so far, possibly Wazoo has the power to attract people. Hearing this, our boy is surprised, asking if he really thinks so, because he still doesn't have any friends. Ragnar asks if by any chance he's not his friend, and Wazoo gets all embarrassed. Anyway, Wazoo thought he shouldn't eat anything dangerous from now on, and the dragon asks why, after all, it makes him much stronger. The protagonist says he knows that, but he's afraid of becoming so absurdly strong that he might stop being human. This guy is quite humble, huh? Suddenly, the two were approaching a lake, and the dragon says the miasma is getting much stronger. Meanwhile, there was a strange creature watching them. Appearing to the two, Ragnar asks not to touch those fluids because they are corrupting the place and creating more swamps. Our boy asks if it's just a matter of defeating that guy, and the dragon wants to know how they will kill it without touching it. Wazoo says he wanted to know if that body is made only of poison, because it would be nice if he could at least land a punch. To be honest, he thinks it won't work, but anyway, he has to try something. Landing the punch, the protagonist's hand sticks, and he says he can feel something. The tip of the hand upwards, I don't know how, but the creature ends up exploding. Wazoo, in his vision there, says that thanks to the goddess, it seems he can punch this thing. Ragnar, not understanding anything, asks if he couldn't let the monster at least show some attack, because he did it as if it were a joke. Suddenly, our boy finds something, picking up a red orb that dropped from the creature. That elf he defeated before definitely had one of those too. Then, Ragmir asks if he's seen this thing before, and Wazoo says it might be his imagination, but suddenly it ends up breaking. Right after, the dragon says they're done there, but Wazoo states he still has to do something about this poisonous swamp. According to Aima's story, people create barriers around when the swamp is large and then burn it, and it's basically what Ragnar was trying to do. Getting closer to the lake, he dips his finger in it and tastes a little. Man, this kid is crazy! The dragon, not knowing what to do, asks him to spit it out, but the boy, in his vision, says it tastes sour like lemon. I don't understand anything anymore. Dunking his head into the puddle, he says he's definitely going to take it all. And a few minutes later, the kid was literally drinking all the poison. Wow, look at the size of the guy's belly. In this, Wazoo says it was very good, despite being too much, while the poor dragon says he almost died of worry. Still, for Wazoo, the forest is safe now and thus won't affect the city of Linux. Suddenly, the ground around was shining and the protagonist wasn't understanding anything because that light was enveloping him. In the middle of that breeze, a voice thanks our hero, calling him a kind adventurer. He was chilling there, wondering whose voice it was. Ragnar takes a look, the light dissipates, and Wazoo was there, lying in the corner. The kid passed out of nowhere, and Ragnar says it seems he went over the limit this time. Possibly because his power is out of the ordinary, he has become a bit ignorant about how normal people usually act and think. Indeed, he is a very good person, with a kind heart who wants to use his power to save others, and possibly that's why his daughter likes him so much, so he must recognize the man his daughter chose. In that case, he will lend his strength whenever needed, and from now on they will be best friends. Wow, that went from 0 to 100 really fast. A little later, the guild leader doesn't believe the story because Wazoo managed to deal with that swamp without even burning the forest. Noticing that the boy is a bit pale, he asks if he's okay, and the protagonist replies that he just has a little stomachache today. Reagan says again that he can't imagine how he dealt with a swamp without burning the forest, asking if by any chance he drank all the swamp water, although there's no way for that to happen. Anyway, he wants to apologize for making him go on all those pointless missions, and is aware that he is much stronger than everyone else there, but still, he shouldn't push himself so hard. Changing the subject, he mentions that he will deliver his reward later, so he just needs to rest well today. Wazoo says he also wants to do that, but Nenya had just appeared saying that Tata wanted to meet again. In response, Reagan says he seems to be getting along well with those girls. And Wazoo says it's nothing much, because they just wanted to thank him for dealing with the poisonous swamp problem. The guild leader asks if he already knows about Tata's problem, and Wazoo says it's about her debt with the city lord. They finally got enough evidence to incriminate him, and it seems there are other cases besides Tata's because he did a lot of things under the radar. So tomorrow, they will take this matter to court after finishing building the case against him. Hearing this, Wazoo is happy, saying that Tata will now be a free person, and possibly his first friend too. Wow, isn't the kid really alone, huh? Reagan says he was afraid the city lord might do something drastic tonight, so he was planning to ask to stay by her side. Obviously, that was well before knowing the boy was quite unwell, but he says he should just leave the rest to him. After all, this little flu won't be enough to kill him. A little later, the MC was walking through the city saying he feels bad and thought he was immune to all negative effects, asking the goddess what's happening. Suddenly, the card goddess gets very nervous, asking what's on his mind. That guild card was her private love nest, wanting to know why he brought another woman there. I'm not understanding anything anymore. Soon after, the goddess says she was talking about the earth goddess. Wow, this breeze is getting stronger, huh? And the other goddess asks what's wrong with that since Wazoo had wished for a harem, so there wouldn't be a problem with her being there. She was very moved when she saw the hard work he was doing to save the forest and the kindness of not burning it. So, to prove her gratitude, she wants to bless him with her divine protection too. Wazoo, desperate, says he doesn't need any more protection, and suddenly the card starts to glow. A bunch of his stats increased absurdly, and the only thing that couldn't decrease, which was his human class, had dropped. At this point, Wazoo gets a sense of what's happening, so it means he was feeling unwell because he leveled up, and the goddess says he's right and should just think of it as a blessing in disguise. His body will probably get used to it quickly, so he should at least rest a bit now. Wazoo says he really wants to do that, but he needs to get to the mansion as soon as possible. Suddenly, our boy ends up bumping into a hooded guy. The man, looking at our hero, says he looks too pale, asking if he needs some kind of medicine. However, he doesn't have any high-level ones with him, but he has any normal medication he might need on hand, asking if he wants to take a look. Wazoo says maybe next time because he just wants to rest now. Then the man apologizes, stares at Wazoo, and the poor guy doesn't understand anything. Suddenly, he starts laughing, saying of course he wouldn't be someone as carefree as him. Besides, his name is Shiro. Ask him to buy something when they meet again. As he leaves, the protagonist is still trying to understand what happened, but that's not important now, and the best thing to do is go protect Tata. A few hours later, the boy arrives at the inn, and Nenya is quite nervous, asking why he took so long because they thought something had happened. He also seems quite pale, and Wazoo says it's not exactly because of the poison. Changing the subject, Melia mentions that now is a very important moment for them, and that's why they need him in perfect shape, as they don't know what might happen at any moment. However, the poor guy suddenly collapses on the floor, and the girl tried to help, and on the other side of the city, there's a bunch of monsters together. A hooded guy says that unfortunately, even with 4 red orbs, none of them transformed the way he was expecting. Still, this should be enough to make things more interesting. A little later, at the guild, a guy tells Reagan that he has a problem. Regarding the report of an adventurer who had just returned, goblins are heading towards the southern borders of Linniki. In response, Reagan says that goblins are nothing to worry about, but the adventurer mentions that there are about 1,000 heading straight there. Back at the inn, the protagonist was exhausted, sleeping on Tata's lap. Suddenly, he opens his eyes and the girl says that he fainted on the way home. Wazoo apologizes and Tata says that the swamp must have been really tough for him to faint despite his incredible strength. Suddenly, the boy grabs her shoulder, asking if he is really a human being. Asking to be touched, he needs absolute certainty that he still remains normal. Out of nowhere, the protagonist opens his mouth and asks if there is anything strange. Tata just stares, getting a little closer, but then Nenya appears to break the mood. Entering the room, she notices that our hero is awake, saying she's happy even though not too worried. Changing the subject, she talked to the owner and he said that Wazoo dealt with the poisonous swamp. But Wazoo says there was no problem, and it was the least he could do. At this, Nenya asks what he really did to get rid of the swamp because she doesn't believe a human is capable of such a thing. And Tata, not understanding anything, wants to know where this is going and if by any chance the protagonist is not a human. Soon after, our hero says he's happy to hear that he still seems like a normal human, and the curious girl asks what the secret behind all this strength is. Even so, it doesn't matter because everyone has some kind of secret. To be honest, I'm not sure if there's really anything behind all this strength, but I know I always feel uneasy about being so strong, but obviously it's all fine. After all, he continues to be a human as always and can see that clearly and will continue to believe that from now on. Soon after, Manga takes a look out the window, seeing a bunch of people gathered, and suddenly someone appears saying they are in big trouble. A horde of goblins is coming to attack the capital, asking where the owner is. Menya says he mentioned he was going to meet with the guildmaster to stop all these monsters, and hearing this, Wazoo, surprised, asks if Garrity can fight. The girl is surprised he doesn't know this because some time ago, Garrity and the guildmaster were extremely powerful adventurers. Tata asks if there are many goblins, and the woman replies that the count was over 1,000. Hearing this, our boy was calm, saying, "It's time to move." Suddenly, Tata gets closer to Wazoo, saying she won't ask him to save the capital, but he should just prioritize his safety and not overexert himself. Hearing this, Wazoo tells her not to worry because no matter what happens, he won't die, and since he's leaving, he'll leave the rest to Nenya. He's just going to defeat some goblins and then come back, and hearing this, the girl just stares. On the other side of the capital, it was complete chaos. Everyone was unsure of what to do. On one side, there was a bunch of orcs trying to enter the gate, and the other adventurers were trying to defend. Seeing the situation, Orlando says there are too many monsters, and if they open the gates now, they'll destroy the capital. But still, the adventurers think they can handle all of this. The kid is almost opening the gate, but suddenly someone calls for him. With Wazoo appearing, he asks what this mess is and where the goblins are, and the guy says they're outside pushing the gate. Since there are so many monsters, if they open the gates now, they'll annihilate the capital, and the gate won't hold much longer in this situation. To sum up, even with this many adventurers, they don't stand a chance against them. At this, Wazoo asks where Garrett and the guild leader are, but Orlando says they're outside the gate. In that case, they need to go save them and are very aware of this, but there are civilians living in the capital, and it's horrible to compare human lives. He wouldn't be able to choose if it were to protect someone, and to sum up, he can't do anything, and if he were a little stronger, none of this would be happening. Then, our hero asks not to worry, starting to stretch calmly, and asks to leave the rest to him. If they reduce the horde a bit there, they can join the battle too. So when he gives the signal, they need to open the gate. Suddenly, the protagonist starts running, takes a leap, and wow, the kid jumped over the wall just by running. Looking at the ground, he is surprised because, for sure, there are a bunch of goblins. Preparing a punch, he easily annihilates a bunch of. The kid is really something and then says he thinks he got rid of enough, asking Orlando to open the gate now. And the kid, just looking through the crack, is surprised because the protagonist had taken care of everyone so quickly. Soon after, he says he will leave the rest to the adventurers aside, so they have to do their best. Without wasting time, all the adventurers leave the gate, and Wazoo says he will look for Reagan while leaving this place with Orlando. A little further ahead on the battlefield, there was Reagan to feed him some orcs. Still, those damn things don't stop appearing, asking Garrett if everything is okay. He says they managed to do very little with this number of men, but the Goblin King is around somewhere, and if they can kill him, the goblins might start to flee. But then suddenly, Wazoo appears saying it seemed like they were having problems, so he came to help, asking what the goblins are doing. Reagan says that this time there is a monster called the Goblin King controlling the rest of them, and the MC says that if that's the case, they should kill this guy. However, the guild leader asks to wait because if they take down the leader, the rest of the goblins might scatter, starting to attack villages randomly. That's not a risk they can take, and for this reason, they want to resolve this mess here and now, gathering everyone to defeat them with a single attack. The protagonist, nervous, doesn't know what to do, and suddenly, an explosion happens. Garrett notices it came from the gate, and soon after, a badly injured guy appears, saying that the situation just got worse because now there's a demon at the north gate. Wazoo asks what he means by that, and Garrett says it's a magical beast that was once a human and a creature that can create and control an immense amount of magical power. Demons have an incredible amount of magic that their human bodies can't handle, so they become something much more powerful. But in this process, they lose their own control and succumb to madness, which is something definitely irrecoverable. Surprised, the protagonist asks if their appearance changes too, and Garrett says you can already tell at first glance that they are no longer human. Seeing the situation, our hero gets the idea more or less, because it seems the same thing happened that time with Gazuna in the elf village. Anyway, he will have to go back to the north gate and end this mess. On the other side of the city, at the inn, Tata was walking around the city wanting to know where the explosion came from. Probably Wazoo might be in trouble, and Nenia says she knows she's really worried, but Wazoo is very strong, and she's sure he must be okay. Tata, trembling, says there's something behind her, and when she looks back, she already gets punched and thrown far away. The girl is surprised for not having sensed the creature's presence, and to make things worse, it had already grabbed Tata. Suddenly, the ugly creature starts talking, saying that Tata is now his. The girl, not believing it, asks if by any chance he is the lord of the city. Wow, the creature is really ugly, huh? Soon after, Nenya asks what kind of magic he used to achieve that form. Then the demon says he now has Tata, so they will fall into despair against the power of demons. On the other side of the city, the creatures were eager to enter the gate. In the capital, people didn't know what to do, and even the Dragon King's family was just watching. The protagonist, meanwhile, was walking through the battlefield, seeing a bunch of orcs coming in. Suddenly he stopped, saying those orcs seemed familiar. Remembering their faces, these guys were from that group that threw him out of the bar before. At the same moment, the three go at him, and the protagonist responds with just one punch. Meanwhile, he remembers Garrett saying it's too late, because none of them can be saved, and once they transform, there's no turning back. Wazoo says he doesn't know why they ended up like this, but if they can't return to being human, then he will use all his power to stop them. All this to prevent them from suffering. In a few seconds, our boy breaks through the defense of all three at once. Everyone there was surprised, wanting to know who this kid is. Getting closer, the protagonist asks if they are okay, and the other adventurer thanks him, because now that he has dealt with the demons, they will be able to handle things there. Wazoo says that if that's the case, he will return to where the guild leader is, and as he starts to leave, the adventurer wonders if this kid is really a dragon tamer. A few minutes later, Wazoo had already returned to where Reagan was, informing him that he defeated all the demons. Reagan says that's great, but even with reinforcements, they couldn't reduce the goblins' forces. In short, he's afraid of losing this battle without the protagonist's help, and in that case, counts on him. Hearing this, our boy gets all excited, saying it was as he thought, because having people depend on him is really great. Suddenly he looks back, and Reagan asks if something is wrong, to which he replies that he has a bad feeling for some reason. Shortly after, Nenya appears there all wounded, and Wazoo, not understanding anything, asks what happened, and the girl is happy to have found him. Apologizing, she mentions that Tata was kidnapped by the city lord. The idiot somehow turned into a monster with 2 wings on his back and couldn't do anything to stop him. Apologizing, she states that she wasn't able to protect her sister. Said at this, Garrett asks what the guild leader thinks the Lord will do after kidnapping her. The guy says that if they're discussing that trash, then he'll probably force Tata to marry him and make her his toy for the rest of her life. He will certainly imprison her in the mansion without contact with anyone and play until he's satisfied, and if that happens, it will be too late to save her. Hearing this, Garrett says that once this trash disguised himself as a guest and visited his business while he wasn't there. When he found Tata, she was lying on the floor, almost passing away. He knows very well that she asked to work there to help her parents pay their debt. However, she would rather die if she knew she had to serve that disgusting city lord. Moreover, she would end up being like his wife if she couldn't pay off that debt anyways, not asking if she really has to be in a marriage she never wanted without experiencing true love even once. Poor girl, she suffered her whole life. Even so, when she gathers the money to pay off her debt and becomes a free woman, there won't be anyone who can love this tainted body. After that day, Nenya decided to do what she could to protect Tata from that man, but in the end, he still ended up kidnapping her. That was her sister who always smiled, no matter how desperate the situation was. Hearing this, Wazoo says he knows that feeling very well too. Suddenly, another adventurer appears there, saying they can no longer hold back the monsters. Even with reinforcements, the numbers are much more than they can handle. But even hearing this, Reagan asks the protagonist to go where Tata is. After all, he is the only one who can save her from that man. Hearing this, Wazoo freezes because if he leaves now, the others might end up being killed, wondering which choice could be the right one and begging for someone to give him the answer. Suddenly a light appears in the sky and someone asks if he needs help. At that moment, perfect, the giant dragon appears and this guy never disappoints. Then, he says he's not sure what's happening there, but it seems there's a place Wazoo needs to go so he can rest assured because he will take care of this place. Hearing this, Wazoo gets all happy, saying he never said something like this in his life, but he's counting on his best friend. The dragon says nothing and then asks Reagan to inform him of the size of the enemy forces, and the leader responds that it's around 800, but there's probably also a goblin king. Then Ragnar says he won't waste any more time and will turn everyone into charcoal. With just one breath, he wipes out an entire army of orcs. All the adventurers are surprised by the power of the Dragon King. Soon after, he says he had said before that he wouldn't waste any more time, asking if Reagan knew why, because at this moment there are people trembling with fear because of this incident, like his own daughter. The same thing happens with his daughter Mir. Flying over the adventurers, he says they must definitely win this war. Meanwhile, in the city, Tata was inside a room with that lord, who is no longer human. The girl says she had already brought him to that mansion, asking what more he wants from her, and the Lord says that by now she should know after all, she has to become his wife. And obviously, the girl refuses, right? No matter how dirty her body is now, her heart remains pure. Hearing this, the guy slaps her, saying there's no one else but him who would lower themselves to the point of wanting a tramp like her. Harsh words, huh? To sum up, she was just someone whose virginity was stolen by some guy. But Tata says that didn't happen after all. She shot first. She decided her true first time has to be given to someone she loves from the bottom of her heart. And it's definitely not him. After all, she already has someone she loves, and that's why she'll never be his. Hearing this, the Lord gets even angrier, saying he'll have to find a way to make her bear his children. Crazy. Now it's really bad, huh? Things are just getting worse and worse, and the Lord says he'll do it multiple times until she can't refuse him again. Then suddenly, the protagonist appears to save the day and with just one kick knocks the creature out. That's it, kid. Now I believe in you. Hugging Tata, he apologizes for being late. In this, the girl asks why he was there, as the others are fighting outside. But our hero assures her it's all fine because everyone has joined forces and it's almost over now. In the end, he got there because of Menya, who told the story and seems to have caused problems again, but it's all good because, in the end, he's her bodyguard. Matt, taking off his shirt, he states it would be bad to be seen like this, and hearing all this, Tata asks why he's so kind to someone like her. But suddenly, man, the Lord was still alive, asking how he got into this room, and Wazoo responds that he entered through the wall normally. Still, there are at least 30 rank B adventurers protecting the mansion, and they wouldn't let an intruder pass by them so easily. Then, Wazoo, opening the door, shows all those adventurers falling to the ground, asking if he's talking about those guys. He also wants to know how they can be hiding in the mansion of a city trash while there's an emergency like this. Therefore, there was no other way but to punch their faces. Then, the demon says it doesn't matter, because even being rank B adventurers, they were just mere humans. No matter how strong they are, because in front of the power he obtained, it's completely useless. I didn't understand any of this analogy, but he said his water is the serpent that pierces through everything and his flame burns all creation without exception. Out of nowhere, the creature summons a spiral of fire, and the protagonist just watches. The fire heads in his direction, and the kid doesn't move a muscle. Meanwhile, that hooded guy was just watching everything from afar. He never imagined this kind of thing would end up happening with that idiot guy he met on the street. He doesn't know how, but he's stupidly strong. Not to mention he managed to befriend literally the Dragon King. A lot of twists are happening, but the Count's power is different from the others, asking how he's going to deal with this. As the fire was heading towards Wazoo, Tata begs him to run away quickly. Suddenly, a goddess, which I don't know who she is, starts talking in his head, saying she's water and fire at the same time, and this power is quite special. But of course, they wouldn't let their boy get hurt, right? Wow, the two appear beside him and, calling the protagonist an agent of evil, ask him to do his best. Our hero takes a defensive stance, and Tata, seeing what's happening, asks to stop all this and just abandon her. He, however, asks her not to worry because now he was completely calm. The girl just stares and, while crying, wants to know the reason for going so far to help someone like her. At the same moment, Wazoo disperses the attack, and the demon, surprised, asks how he remained unscathed. Our boy, answering her question, says he did all this because he loves her. Wow, I didn't expect that, huh? The girl gets embarrassed, and the protagonist then realizes what he had said. After all, he didn't plan to confess in such a strange situation like this. Making an excuse, he says he said it without thinking, and Tata states he shouldn't love a woman like her because she's not worthy of any of it, as her body is dirty. However, for Wazoo, that's not true, as she is very beautiful. Tata had been with many people, even with that despicable man, but still, our hero doesn't mind. That's what you call a calm cuckold. Just kidding. Even facing her, he is sure he loves her. Meanwhile, the lord of the city was nervous because Wazoo had been involved with his woman since he arrived. Hearing that, the protagonist also gets nervous, asking what he means by his woman. With just one punch, the creature is down and even releases that orb. Picking up the sphere, Wazoo says it's as he thought, because the same thing happened in the elf village with gas. A little later, the boy was walking through the city while carrying Tata in his arms. There's definitely some chemistry there. He says that after dropping her off at the brothel, he needs to check how things are in the city. Then, the whole group shows up saying they took care of those goblins. Nenia, seeing that her sister was fine, is also very happy, thanking Wazoo. Hearing this, he smiles, saying it means a lot, considering she didn't trust him much from the start. In the end, everything turned out well, and everyone returned unharmed. Thanks to Wazoo's efforts and the people of the city, the chaos that was in Linik that day was suppressed, and, to sum up, peace returned once again. The next day, our hero was very happy because everything returned to normal. Since tomorrow looks interesting, he's going to ask Tata out, and isn't it something that the boy remembered that ring? Now I appreciate it, huh? For sure Mir will be quite angry, but he just needs to ask Tata to be his friend and see if she'll travel with him. But before that, there's something to do. Next scene, the city lord was bedridden, and Reagan says it's useless because they can't even tell if they're alive or dead. He certainly won't get up anytime soon, and even asked some magic experts, but they weren't close to an answer yet. They said he would probably die soon, and the same story goes for the 3 adventurers of Black Blaze. Wazoo, however, says that when he defeated them, an orb came out of their mouth, and the same happened with the monster he defeated in the elf village. Reagan says this is probably related because he heard before that the orb is removed from the body when they are defeated and ends up breaking. Shortly after, Orlando says there are reports from citizens who saw these 3 guys buying some orbs from a very suspicious guy wearing a hood. They gained power from external sources instead of getting stronger naturally, which means there's someone out there distributing red orbs to turn people into monsters. Wazoo, upon hearing about this hooded guy, remembers something, and Orlando questions if he knows this guy. He says he once saw this man, but since his face was covered by a hood, he couldn't see who it was clearly. Reagan says that, in that case, he will request an investigation. Changing the subject, he asks if Wazoo isn't going after Tata, and hearing this, the boy is confused, wanting to know what's happening and where Tata is going. Reagan is surprised that Wazoo doesn't know this, as she left Linniki with her family and heard that Garrett and his subordinates are escorting them on a trip. So he thought the two were quite close and assumed he would go after her. Hearing this, the protagonist is surprised because she hadn't mentioned anything about it to him. A few minutes later, the boy was at the inn where Tata stayed. Noticing that Nenya was there, he asks where Tata went, but she also doesn't know anything. Tata had told her to track her by her scent and then follow, and also promised not to bring anyone. Wazoo asks if he can at least go, and the girl says it's for the safety of her sister and her family. So obviously she trusts the boy, but it's not something she can decide. Seeing the situation, the protagonist says he understands because living peacefully somewhere is much better for her. Suddenly, it starts to rain, and Wazoo says that before the rain gets stronger, he's leaving, so she should take care, asking to at least send a hello to Tada. Shortly after, the girl leaves and the protagonist remains standing in the rain. Once again, the boy was sidelined. Poor guy. The scene then shifts to a little outside the city, with Salona still around. She says she was worried in recent days, and maybe she should just return to the village. She was there before because she wanted to join Wazoo's harem, but when she had the chance, it seemed he already had good companions. So that's kind of a bit depressing, right? Normally I wouldn't be worried about this kind of thing, but when it comes to Wazoo, I can't forget about it. Suddenly, another girl gets off a carriage saying she's going back to the city. That was Tata, and her family tries to stop her, saying it's too dangerous to stay there. However, the girl was really upset because no one had told the protagonist anything. She knows very well that they would eventually see each other again, but they will be away for half a year. The way she left there, it seems like she cut him out of her life and ran away, and her father says they don't have time to look for this man. Then Garrett appears asking what's wrong, and Tata asks to go back to Linux. Her mother asks why she would go so far just to see a guy like that, and she, without hesitation, responds that she loves him. Meanwhile, Salona was listening to the whole conversation, getting quite surprised. Her parents also don't believe it, but still, surprisingly, they agree to go back there. At the same moment, Salona comes closer, saying she wants to ask something. Taking a look at Tata's physique, you can see she's quite superior, if you know what I mean. Even so, Salona asks if this Wazoo they're talking about is incredibly strong, with black hair and a completely normal appearance. Tata gets surprised, wondering what Salona might be thinking. Basically, they want to join Wazoo's harem, man. The guy is really getting famous, huh? A little later, they were having coffee, staring at each other, asking what kind of relationship they have with the protagonist. Salona says they're talking about Wazoo, so surely he would help someone somewhere, and that person would probably fall in love. Then Tata smiles, affirming that it means her heart was also stolen by him. Next, Salona says that Wazoo continues to present himself as a mediocre person, even though he's so strong he could defeat any monster with one punch, so it's kind of impossible for someone not to fall in love with him after being protected. Tata says that, besides that, he's very kind, and it's like he has the pure heart of a young teenager, so surely there isn't a woman who wouldn't want to dedicate her whole life to someone like him. After hearing what each other said, they fall silent. In this case, it means they are already members of Wazoo's harem. Wow, now they're sorting everything out on their own, huh? Changing the subject, Tata asks if she could talk about the things that happened between the two. Time passes, the two continue talking about our hero, and at the inn, poor Mir was quite sad. Since Tata left, the protagonist hasn't gotten out of bed, man. The poor guy was really down. You know, it's crazy. Downstairs, Taylor says that Wazoo has been in bed for 5 days and isn't even eating properly. Then Lula says that Ragnar should try to cheer him up. The dragon asks if she knows the purpose of Wazoo's journey because it seems like he kind of wants some companions to return to his hometown. Somehow, he got hurt and left that place. But if he had companions, then his stress would be healed and he'd be confident enough to return, and that's at least what he had said. Soon after, Mel says that they aren't the friends Wazoo wanted and are just watching his future along with their daughter. Megel says this isn't the time to lend a hand because what he really needs to do is realize for himself what it means to make friends. Suddenly, Orlando appears at the inn asking where the protagonist is. With Lula saying he's in the room, a kid says he has to find a way to talk to him. After all, he had heard everything from the guild leader, and a few minutes later, he wakes Wazoo up asking how long he's going to keep sleeping. A little later, Wazoo is already up asking what he wants from him, and Orlando says he wants a fair fight. Our boy was still down, saying obviously he can't win. Even so, the guy goes after Wazoo, and the kid dodges while still sleepy. It's crazy. Tripping Orlando, he asks if that's enough because he wants to go back to sleep. At that, the boy is surprised, right? Because he used all his power but couldn't make a scratch. Changing the subject, Wazoo says he wasn't there just to lose, asking what he wants, and Orlando questions if after moving a bit he feels more energized. When you're feeling sad, you should feel better if you go out and move your body, and our hero says it could be true if his opponent were stronger. That if Reagan asked him to do something boring like that, he would hate it. However, Orlando says he came to talk about Tata. Suddenly, Wazoo gets stressed, asking never to mention that name. He wants to know why he came to rub salt in his wounds, and the kid says it's because Wazoo is just staying in bed and couldn't just watch. In that case, he has something to say because he's not doing well at all. Hearing this, the poor MC breaks down because he knew his face wasn't handsome, but it's obvious that's not what Orlando is talking about. The reason he's not doing well is because of his current situation and how a man pities him, asking who he thinks he is now. When he saw him defeating the goblins, he was quite impressed to know there's someone so strong in this world, so he respects him from the bottom of his heart. but at the same time, he wished to be like him. Not just a guard or a man, but someone who can protect others, and that's what he wants to be. He can't stay silent after seeing someone he admires lock himself in his room because of a woman, but Wazoo says it has nothing to do with him, asking why he has to hear this from someone like him. And Orlando says he doesn't know how he thinks of him, but he still considers him a friend. At this, the MC is surprised, saying they became quite close out of nowhere, and the guy says that's why he wants him to return to normal. Hearing this, Wazoo wants to know if he could answer a question. Orlando and a bunch of people think he's strong, but his heart strength doesn't match his physical strength. To sum up, he's not confident in himself, so he looks for friends to fill the void. They seem to have fallen for him, but even so, he was thrown away, and every time that happens, he hides in his room. In this world, there are a lot of people who have friends with them throughout their journey, and he feels very envious of that, because even though he has a lot of strength, no one follows him, so these things somehow become miserable over time. Suddenly, Orlando punches the protagonist, asking what kind of thinking is that because he's basically saying his strength is useless. To begin with, he doesn't have to care because no one wants to follow him. After all, he saved the city of Linux. Everyone praises Ragnar, but the real hero is him. Moreover, he also saved the woman he loves, so he can't help but be proud of that. It's true the girl disappeared, but even so, he made her smile, asking if that's not enough. Or if by chance, he's the type of person who doesn't care about her happiness and will force her to be his friend. At this, he asks the protagonist what he thinks all this power is for. Helping people along the way, solving problems, and making people smile once again, a traveler who is known as a hero by everyone, asking if that's not incredible. Something many people would want to have, so he has to be that guy. Hearing this, our hero gets somewhat excited, saying it sounds quite interesting. Orlando smiles and then says, "It's all decided." I don't know how, but meanwhile, the Dragon King's family was watching everything that happened. A little later, the scene shifts to the guild hall with Ragnar not believing that the two of them are leaving Linux. He had trained Orlando a bit before, and even managed to acquire some skills, and if the protagonist is saying this, he must be prepared. Since Orlando wants to be a knight, he has to go to the royal capital. Even though this happened out of nowhere, now Wazoo is much more excited than before, so it's the perfect time to start a journey. A few minutes later, Lula was quite sad knowing the news that Wazoo is leaving. However, man, she says that a regular customer is leaving, and the girl just wanted his money, huh? Soon after, Kayla tells him to do his best, and someday he has to come back to Linux. The guild leader appears, handing something over and says this is the reward for the mission so far. Basically, it's a badge that all the members of his group had when he was still an adventurer. He should show this to the guild master at the adventurer's headquarters in the capital and will receive some pretty interesting items. To sum up, his older sister is a bit temperamental, and hearing this, our hero trembles immediately. Anyway, they were already leaving, saying goodbye to everyone they had met in the city of Linux. Man, the kid really stayed there for quite a while, huh? Ragnar also returned with his family to the castle, and meanwhile, the protagonist goes to the royal capital with his little dragon and Orlando. However, there's something the kid still didn't know. Why was Tata following him? And isn't it something that the girl actually came back, huh? Then Garrett says that Wazoo has a very interesting future. The kid is really amazing, but even so, he didn't know he would be able to get close to two such beautiful girls. Meanwhile, Nenya was there in the corner saying that if she had known it would end up like this, she would have brought him. It's kind of hard to see his face when he's sad. Hearing this, the two girls roughly understand what's happening, asking if by any chance she's a candidate for the protagonist's harem. Nenya gets all embarrassed, saying she's just a bodyguard. And Salona says there's no way to know because she might end up noticing his charm at any moment. Man, the guy really is something else, and the worst part is he doesn't even know all of this yet. And on the other side, there was the protagonist and Orlando traveling. After defeating a monster, the kid was out of energy, asking if he could rest a bit. Surprised, the protagonist asks if he was already tired after defeating only 30 monsters. Then the guy asks not to be compared to his abnormal energy. In this, he says he was joking, but he's sure he's much stronger than when they left Linux. But Orlando says he can't feel the difference when compared to him. To sum up, he envies him a lot, and even when he's on the brink of death, he receives the goddess's divine protection and becomes much more powerful. Wazoo says he knows the increase in his stats is thanks to the goddesses, but it was Mir who saved him from the brink of death. She had given him something to eat, and from then on, he can ingest anything. And the worst part is that every time he eats strange things, he gets much stronger. So to sum up, all of this probably happened because of his dragon. Besides, even though he killed 30 monsters, his stats didn't increase much. And Orlando says that when Wazoo talked about how he got stronger, he really felt incapable. After all, he can become more powerful without any effort. However, After spending so much time together, he realized that he doesn't show off or abuse his power. This kind of attitude doesn't come without effort, and that's why people trust him. Our hero says that even so, he still doesn't have many people around him. And Orlando, surprised, says that this personality of his makes him a bit more human. When someone is in danger, a normal person thinks they have to call someone to help. And since he finds this kind of attitude amazing, he wants to be that kind of man too. Hearing this, Wazoo asks if he intends to become a knight when they reach the city of Mambonde. Then he has to be promoted and become someone who can command troops, and for 50 days before they reach the royal capital, he'll give him some lessons because he'll definitely get much stronger. In this, Orlando says he was forced to defeat monsters and wasn't taught anything, and Wazoo states it's because he's a bit strict in training. Changing the subject, it's already time to sleep, and it's important to rest that day. Asking Mir to prepare everything, she uses this crazy space-time ability and throws a bunch of backpacks. Man, isn't that ability useful? Orlando is also surprised and then asks if Mir can't transform into a human too, since his family had done the same thing before. Our boy states that, according to Ragnir, she doesn't yet have the power to transform, but she might end up doing so someday. Then the guy says that even if the protagonist got dumped by a bunch of women, this little dragon saved his wife and is always by his side. So maybe the one who could be his wife was by his side from the beginning. The conversation goes on until it gets later, and sometime later, it's already morning with the protagonist waking up and suddenly hearing a sound. Someone asks what they're trying to do and, apologizing, says it was what they were ordered to do. Soon after, Wazoo wakes Orlando, telling him he heard some people fighting. I'm not understanding anything. Hearing that sound once again, the kid suddenly starts running. A little further into the forest, there's a bunch of men gathered, and man, this scene is kind of forbidden, huh? Not cool, dude. Meanwhile, a girl tells them to stop all of this because those are her subordinates, and if they want to have fun with someone, it has to be with her. The human gives her a look over and asks who would want to do that with her. Suddenly, Wazoo and Orlando arrive at the scene, seeing a bunch of women in danger. Without wasting time, the two go down to face everyone. The bandits stare them down, and Wazoo asks Orlando to handle the three armored guys. The kid, however, wasn't confident, but the protagonist says that with his strength now, he can do it. He reassures him that he'll take care of the rest, and then two big guys appear, asking what he's talking about. Wazoo, pretending to be clueless, asks who they are, and the guy says his gang is occupying that area. They are called the Gondo brothers, and Wazoo, saying he doesn't know who they are, easily takes them down. Meanwhile, Orlando also goes after the armored guys, and wow, the kid was really handling it. A little later, the bandits had all been defeated, and the protagonist, grabbing a bottle of water, goes to help the other girls. There's also one who is tied up, and Wazoo asks if she's okay. The girl thanks our hero and says she'll free her, but there's a bit of a problem. The girl is literally too big and is having a hard time being freed. A few minutes later, the girl introduces herself, saying she's an assistant to the second princess of the kingdom of Mambonde, and those around her are her subordinates. First, she has to apologize for everything that happened, seeing such an embarrassing situation. Wazoo says they were heading to Mambonde, so it was lucky they found them. And suddenly, the girl's hand starts to glow. Realizing it was a ring, a voice comes from it asking if she can hear it. It wants to know if she's safe because Floyd said she and her subordinates were under attack. And besides that, they just arrived at Mima Village, planning to meet there. The next scene goes to another city with a girl saying they just arrived at Mima Village, so they have to meet there. But then a bunch of armored guys appear, saying they finally found her. The girl's name there is Nimishima, and suddenly the other human there throws something. In the middle of that smoke, they start to flee, and the man thinks that against all these enemies, they have no chance. They can only escape to this house on the outskirts and put up barriers around it, praying that Cassie brings reinforcements and comes to rescue them soon. They can only wait until the barrier falls, and finally, their investigation reached this point. Just a little more, and they could finally complete their mission. Then suddenly, Namishima hears some noise from the window. There was the protagonist defeating those armored guys, and the girl was apparently watching everything. This encounter and this feeling were undoubtedly love at first sight. Wow, I'm feeling the vibe now. Hara said that even without knowing his name and just looking at his back, she had completely fallen in love. Soon after, the scene goes to a few days earlier in a place called Oishi Village. Our hero was doing something saying that everyone is there. Not understanding anything, Orlando asks if they are still alive, and Wazoo replies that there is no house or anything to hold them, so the kid literally buried everyone there. It's really a pretty pitiful sight, and suddenly someone calls for the girl. Earlier, she talked to the chief of Oishi Village and will go to Linux to make sure those bandits are punished as quickly as possible. Soon after, the girl on the horse is surprised by something, and the protagonist just stares. She says she will definitely return, so when the time comes, she wants to know a little about his journey, and Wazoo meanwhile is all embarrassed. However, the girl was talking to Orlando, and in that, our poor hero loses hope. The girl leaves, Orlando was all embarrassed, and then a girl says that, under Captain Kessu's orders, they will stay in the village to continue watching the bandit. It's a bit annoying not being able to accompany him from then on, but when they meet again, they have to find a way to leave. Wow, this guy is really something. Wazoo, from the corner, just observes, saying that Orlando got all the girls, but even so, he had saved them before too. As he thought before, his probable problem is his face, so maybe he has to do something like change his hair. Soon after, Kessu looks at the protagonist, and the two stare at each other. She gives a wink, our boy takes a look at the product without knowing what to say. Wow, the kid is hopeless, huh? If asked if this is his type, he really couldn't answer, but still, she seems to be cute, or at least, I don't know. With your strength, it wouldn't be difficult, so being chubby isn't exactly a problem. Right after, he asks her if it's okay not to go straight to where her master is. And the girl responds that, riding a horse as fast as possible, it would still take a day to reach the village of Manhwa, but since they have a barrier protecting them, it will probably be fine. That said, it's better to hurry up, and the horses were already prepared. The protagonist, however, says there's no need because he'll just run. The girl doesn't understand anything, and then you can only see the dust because the protagonist had already left. She is surprised by this strength, and Orlando was there in the corner, all envious. A little later, it was already night, and the three were there by the campfire. Cassie says it's a bit late, but still wants to thank them for helping, and Wazoo says it was nothing because they were just heading to the city of Mambonde too. Changing the subject, she asks if the person she serves is so important because she'd like to ask for something. To summarize, Orlando wants to be a knight, so when everything is resolved, he would like to leave him in their hands. Hearing this, Cassie says that if that's the case, he should talk to Namisha too, but for all this trouble to end, it will take some time. Wazoo asks if he can know more, and the girl says no, because when he meets Namisha and gains her trust, maybe she could tell him something about the incident that happened in the country. A few hours later, they finally arrived at the village of Manhwa. Orlando says that even though they've arrived, the sun is already set, and there's no one there. At this, Tassie knocks on someone's door, saying she's from the city of Mambonde, and soon after, a woman opens the door. The girl says that 2 days ago, a group of people wearing red armor came and surrounded the house outside the village in large numbers. So with that, the residents ended up being very scared. Hearing this, Orlando and the protagonist exchange a look, and then the guy says there were people wearing red armor among those bandits. When asked if she knows them, Cassie said they left the country secretly for a certain reason and are in the middle of an investigation, and with that, they wanted to stop their searches at all costs. In that case, they need to quickly go to the house outside the village. On the other side, there's a bunch of armored guys surrounding a house. Their captain asks to finish this quickly, ordering them to give up and come out already. It's useless, and no matter how much they think about it, because the rescue won't arrive, and it's a matter of time before their magical power runs out. From afar, the protagonist group was observing, and they really have red armor. Since they have the numerical advantage, Orlando asks what they're going to do, and the girl says that since there's no other option, she'll be the bait. Observing the situation, Wazoo asks if what's surrounding the house is some kind of barrier, because somehow it's getting weaker and weaker. In that case, it's better not to waste much time, so he goes ahead. Soon after, he says those men are different from bandits because they were knights who were trained. However, upon hearing this, Wazoo asks to just do it silently. The girl gives a look, and our boy continues to go after them. Coming up behind one, he punches him, making the others fall asleep too. No one understands what's happening, and the disappointed protagonist realizes he's really bad at hiding his presence. A bunch of knights go after him all at once, but the kid is amazing, defending all the attacks calmly. If they want to kill him, first they have to get the sacred sword. From the window of the house, meanwhile, someone is watching. The girl says it's incredible, and Cassie brought these people to rescue them, but still, the kid seems to be just a normal person. Outside the house, Wazoo continued to send the guys flying. With all the knights defeated, Cassie appears there, saying she didn't know the protagonist was so strong. At this, the barrier opens, and the girl bows, saying she was there to save her. Introducing herself, she says her name is Cassie, and when she opens the door, that girl from before was there. Cassie wasn't understanding anything that was happening, and the girl, meanwhile, was nervous about something. She doesn't stop staring at the protagonist, asking what his name is. With Wazoo introducing himself, she says her name is Namisha, and our boy is surprised because it's the same name as the country. Then she, without thinking, says she's the second princess of the kingdom of Mambonde. A little later, it was already night, and the protagonist was in an inn literally next to that girl. The room isn't even that small, but still, he wanted to know why she was so close. Then, Orlando says they were informed by Captain Cassie, but they didn't expect to find her in this way. The renowned second princess of the Mambonde kingdom, Nemisha, hearing this, asks them not to speak so formally so they can feel at ease. In that case, they will talk this way, and Wazoo says he will sit on the other side. The kid never takes advantage of the situation, man. Nemisha says she hasn't introduced them yet, and that butler is named Floyd, mentioning that he saw the protagonist defeating those knights and literally burying them in the ground. Basically, he was impressed by his good taste, and Wazoo, meanwhile, wasn't understanding anything. Nemisha asks another to introduce herself, and the maid says her name is Kumia. Boy, the girl was all nervous, but then she says it's a pleasure to meet them. Wazoo and Orlando look at her thinking it's a very funny way to speak, and then she bows. But our hero is still staring at something. Since that is quite big if you know what I mean, right? Cassie's and Namanisha's are too, but that girl's is on another level. Wow, if you didn't notice, I'd start to think the guy is gay. Soon after, Orlando introduces himself too, saying he's traveling with the protagonist and they left the city of Linux to go to Mambonde. Namanisha asks if they are adventurers, and he says he's a regular soldier who wants to be a knight, and Wazoo is an adventurer traveling with him to the royal capital. Namanisha assumes they helped Kese and her subordinates defeat the guys in red armor, and the girl says that's exactly what happened. The whole group of armor surrounded the house she was in, but even so, they were completely defeated by Wazoo. Basically, he's a very reliable man, giving a side wind. Wazoo says nothing, and soon after, the goddess starts calling him. Apologizing, he leaves through the door, asking what the goddess wants because they are in a very important meeting. Then suddenly the card shines, dating a skill called danger detection. But a good point is that his humanity is returning to normal again. The Earth goddess, meanwhile, seemed very happy, while the other goddess was pissed off. Wazoo is being accompanied by a slightly chubby woman and a loli, with giant balloons that have an appearance that makes you want to protect. The goddess was super nervous because the girl has a giant bumper, so all those who have the same thing are considered her enemies. The two goddesses continue arguing, and Orlando, hearing this mess from the other side of the door, wants to know what the boy was doing. At that moment, Namanisha says she wanted to ask the question, wanting to know if Wazoo by any chance has a girlfriend. Wow, another one for the harem, huh? Before, she was kind of throwing herself at him, so it might have made him a little angry. But Orlando warns that the kid is just a bit nervous because he's not used to being approached by women. About the girlfriend, he really doesn't have one, but despite his appearance, he has no confidence. To sum up, he gets hurt very easily, and currently, if it's about women, he's very pessimistic about it. Hearing this, I don't know why, but the girl seemed to be happy in some way. A few minutes later, the protagonist returns asking why Namanisha and the others left the royal capital. She says that if she tells, it will end up involving them in this problem, but our hero responds that it's okay. In her country, King Javilha Mambonde and Queen Mirilina Mambonde had 3 children. Her older brother named Navilio, who would be the future king, her older twin sister named Naralina, and she is the youngest, so the Mambonde family governs the country. Floyd says Navilio is good at domestic affairs, diplomacy, strategy, and almost like a genius. If a war starts, Naralina will end all her enemies, and because of her exceptional combat ability, she is called the Valkyrie of the Blood Rain. She's so absurdly strong that she intimidates other countries, but on the other hand, the youngest sister only has kindness and compassion. Mainly using barrier magic, she was called the Princess of the Sacred Blood. Her family lived peacefully without any fights, but her father and mother lost consciousness due to an unknown disease and haven't woken up until now. Then, when her siblings should have stayed together, the eldest and her other sister suddenly started treating each other as enemies. To summarize, they tried to kill themselves and prepared for a war, so there is suspicion that there is some kind of reason. Because this mess fell on their family, after that they gathered their group and ended up investigating the whole matter. Orlando says that even so, the armored guys tried to stop them, but Namanisha says they are not the main reason for their problem. The chubby girl says that even though the main problem was under investigation, they already know the reason the 2 brothers became enemies. But before anything else, she wants to confirm something, asking if they were using anything unusual when the 2 became enemies. It could be anything like accessories, for example, a necklace. Right after, the girl says that this is exactly what the head of the Adventurers Guild at the Eastern Headquarters said. Hearing that, the girl says that this is exactly what the guild head at the Eastern Headquarters in the royal capital Halaya told her. And meanwhile, the protagonist was listening to the background conversation, thinking that this Relaya is Reagan's older sister. Namanisha doesn't understand anything from the conversation, and the chubby girl says that the cursed tools were supposed to be sealed in a locked vault, but they discovered they were stolen. The bracelet is cursed with the mature puppet curse and the necklace with the berserk fury. Wow, I can already see that nothing good will come of this. The longer the cursed tools are used, the stronger the power controlling them will become. And hearing this, the girl asks who made her brothers use these things. Before anything else, they should prioritize breaking the curse over identifying the main culprit. And Cassie says that as long as the tools are removed or destroyed, everything should be fine. At this, Nimanicia becomes thoughtful, saying she is capable of doing that, but Wazoo says they are her brothers, so it should be easy to approach them. Currently, the two literally don't recognize her and have about 6 knights always by their side, so it's not very easy to get close. Wazoo warns that if that's the case, they just have to force their way in, but the chubby girl asserts that those guys are not the same as the ones in red armor, and if compared, they are on the same level as a ranked adventurer. However, Orlando also thinks it's a good idea because if they let our boy use his strength, he will surely accomplish the task. After all, the kid is kind of abnormal. Suddenly, the girl lights up, asking if he can do that, and the protagonist, all confident, affirms he will defeat them all easily. Not long ago, he also said that if they want to kill him, they should get some kind of divine blade. However, it seems that no cut can harm him now because he simply gained an ability to resist that kind of blade. At this, he changes the subject, mentioning that he also has a younger sister, so he can imagine how horrible it is to have siblings hating each other. Still, he has the impression that she is very cheerful and independent, but now that her brothers no longer recognize her, she feels basically a bit lonely, so she is probably having a really hard time now. Moreover, she left the country for the sake of her family to investigate the problem, so one cannot forget that she is truly incredible, asking if the Mambonde family siblings were very close. Hearing this, Orlando says that now he hit hard, but the girl then thanks him. This is a request outside the guild, but for the reason of bringing her brothers back, she wants the protagonist and his group to destroy the cursed tools, asking if by any chance he will accept, and our boy just gives a big smile, saying of course he will, but there is a condition because Orlando wants to become a knight. It's impossible to become a knight out of nowhere, so he wants at least a chance to become one. At this, the girl accepts without any problem, saying he proved his strength by saving Cassie and her subordinates. Orlando kneels in gratitude, and the protagonist says everything went well because now his future is in good hands and there's nothing else he wants. Nimanicia is surprised, asking if that's true, because if it is, she will decide the reward on her own. After all, the gift will literally be her. Wow, I didn't expect that, no. Wazoo doesn't understand anything, and the girl says it's good that he's concerned about Orlando's future as a knight, but he doesn't need to be as formal as she is. He can just call her by her name and talk more casually. Wazoo says that's kind of hard to do, and Nimanicia, getting closer, just gives a smile. Having no other choice, the protagonist agrees, asking if she's happy with all this now, and the girl responds that she is. With that, they must head to the royal capital tomorrow morning. As he leaves, he mentions that the men's room is separate from the women's, and the butler says it's fine to stay there because Orlando and the others are going to another room. Suddenly, Nimanicia goes after Floyd, landing a punch that sends the poor guy flying through the wall. Wow, isn't the girl strong? A day later, that maid from before was waking up the protagonist. Poor guy, he just wanted to sleep, but there's no other way, right? Wazoo, surprised, says she somehow looks different from yesterday, and shortly after, Floyd appears, announcing that it's time to leave. Getting up, our boy says there's something strange about her, and the butler mentions he forgot to tell him that the girl's name is Komua. She and the other are the same person, and that's what they call a split personality. But even speaking like that, she remains a good person. Then, out of nowhere, the girl appears with a brush saying she's going to clean his body, and the protagonist, trembling, says he can do that himself, right? A little later, the boy was taking a bath, saying those people are very strange. Floyd was thrown out the window and still wasn't hurt, so he doesn't seem human, but even so, it's not like he's in a position to say anything. The little dragon keeps staring, and Wazoo asks why it's looking at him like that. It's probably because he was shirtless, but Wazoo says he has nothing to hide, so it's all good. However, if he could stay in human form like the Dragon Ting, I'm sure it would be quite embarrassing. He also prefers Mir much more the way she is now. A few minutes later, Wazoo had put on his clothes, and Nimanicia noticed his cloak was crooked. Mir looks nervous, and then hugs the protagonist, staring at the girl with that envious look, right? Sometime later, in the royal capital Mambonde, the protagonist group was gathered there, and Nimanicia says she's going with Wazoo to remove the curse from her brothers. Entering the city, Wazoo is surprised because it's expected of the capital, as it's a very large place. The royal capital is divided into 3 parts: the royal castle, the noble wing, and the outer wing. Changing the subject, she asks where Wazoo is from, and he replies that he's from the capital Escoa. In that case, he's used to seeing scenes like these, and Wazoo says he used to live in the mountains, so he's not accustomed to this kind of place. Hearing this, Nimanishi assumes he's been an adventurer for quite some time, and Wazoo says Mambonde is much more prosperous compared to Escoa. With that, the girl is happy because the royal capital only started to prosper after her father took the position and became the base for importing and exporting various rare items since then. Surprised, the boy thinks her father must be a good king, and Nimanishi says he can say that once he meets him because her father doesn't really seem like a king. Arriving at the gate, she asks to wait because she's going to talk to the gate soldiers first. Suddenly, wow, the gate lifts and a carriage appears at full speed. She leaves. Nimanishi had her eyes closed, and when she opens them, the protagonist was by her side. When she says it's dangerous, suddenly someone calls for the girl, saying it's been a long time since they last saw each other. Wazoo asks who it is, and Nimanishi says it's been a long time since she saw him. The boy's name is Dronzer, and the girl asks if he's going to visit her father with a certain chancellor, and the guy says that's right, because it was said by her father to make this kind of visit. Changing the subject, he asks who the man with her is. Wazoo gets all awkward, and she says that person is a very strong adventurer, and recently her brothers have been fighting, so to avoid getting caught in the middle, she hired a bodyguard. Not since she already interviewed him before, she was about to give him a tour of the castle. Hearing this, Dronzer understands everything, but still to him, this guy doesn't seem that strong. Wow, I can see this isn't going to end well, huh? Nimanishi gets a bit irritated and then says they're leaving. Since it seems there aren't people capable of fighting, she suggests he hire a bodyguard. But shortly after, Dronzer says he'd like to talk about his marriage. Hearing this, Wazoo is surprised, and the guy says his father-in-law was disagreeing with it, so they must do something to gain his approval. In that moment, Nimanishi calls for Dronzer once more, and with a bloodthirsty look, simply says goodbye. 11 minutes later, walking through the castle, Wazoo wants to know if he can ask a question, because he heard Dronzer talking about this marriage. Nimanishi, nervous, says that Dronzer is the son of the Duke of Frabond. This country once had two royal families, the Mambon family and the Gurnabond family. Gurnabond was the first king of the country, but he ended up dying before having a successor. In that situation, his cousin, the Duke of Frabond, cooperated with Mambon as support. However, his engagement to that person was forcibly decided by Dronzer's father, named Zace. Even so, she will ask her father to break this engagement when he wakes up because she doesn't want to marry this man. Changing the subject, she asks if by any chance he remembers what she had said before, because the reward for helping her will literally be herself. Meanwhile, Wazoo thinks she must be joking, but the girl says that after being his prize, she could do whatever she wants with the boy. The MC had to be at least a little bit assertive. Suddenly, a bunch of butlers appear, happy that the princess has returned again. Without wasting time, she says she found the cause of the dispute between her two brothers, but first she needs to go to where they are as quickly as possible. However, the maid says they can't do that because they were ordered by her brother not to let anyone approach him, even if they were his own relatives, and a few minutes later Gerald was at the door of the guy's room, and Nimanishi says she just needs to see her brother from afar. Agreeing to do this, the maid says she can't enter there, and, opening the door, the guy realizes his sister has arrived. The boy was exuding that dark aura and had no sparkle in his eyes. Wazoo, surprised, realizes the guy wasn't even looking at them. And Nimanishi says it's as if he were being controlled to endlessly check documents. Wazoo takes a look and then sees the bracelet on his wrist. Nimanishi says her brother is a very good person, who always calms the people around him, always valuing the things he values as if they were his own, begging once again for our boy to save him. The boy just smiles and in the same instant moves into the room. Approaching her brother, he puts his hand on the wrist, breaking the bracelet. Man, it was that easy. The man regains consciousness but then faints, and the soldiers arrive to end this mess. Wazoo tries to calm him down, but out of nowhere, one of the knights tries to kill the girl's brother. Obviously, the protagonist wouldn't let that happen and gives the guy a flying kick. Observing the situation, the protagonist says it was as he thought because this man is one of the people who were wearing the red armor. Without wasting time, the rest of the soldiers arrest the man, saying he was using Nimashima's brother as a hostage. However, now everything is fine because the enemy has been defeated. Soon after, Nimashima gets closer to her brother, and he, regaining consciousness, realizes he was being controlled, apologizing for causing so many problems for his younger sister. But Nimashima says that as long as he is safe, it doesn't matter. Sometime later, Navilio was thanking our boy, saying he was conscious even when he was being controlled, but still his body wouldn't respond. Once again, he thanks him for freeing him from his curse and for being his sister's strength. Suddenly, he bows. but Wazoo says he doesn't need to do all that. However, Navilio insists he must do it as a form of gratitude, and then a fight begins to see who bows their head, but I'm not understanding anything anymore. Nimishima comes to help Wazoo, but then Navilio already understands what's happening. Changing the subject, he asks if he could call the protagonist just by his name. In that case, he can call him brother-in-law, and meanwhile, Wazoo thinks this guy is really nice, even though he's part of the royal family. Nimishima gets all nervous. Wazoo just takes a look and then says he wants to save the other sister too, asking if he knows where she is. That on the other side of the castle, there's a woman training with her sword. She tells the maids not to come any closer because she might accidentally kill them. The maid says if she doesn't eat anything, her body won't hold up. Suddenly, the girl breaks the plate. What is this? Such a mess. She says to bring her brother there because she will definitely kill him this time. Meanwhile, everyone was watching this mess from afar, and Navilio says she's getting more violent than before. Marilena is the person who leads the country's army, so it probably won't be easy to get closer to her. Even though she hates losing, she also has a delicate side when she takes off her armor, asking Wazoo to help her regain her consciousness as well. You know how it goes, right? Our boy just smiles, saying he should leave the rest to him. In the girl's mind, she wants to know exactly what this is, because it's as if someone was controlling her body and ended up hurting those near her. She doesn't know if it's some magical curse, wondering if her heart is so weak to lose to this force. Soon after, someone in her head asks her to pull herself together, questioning if she really is the strongest person in this country. Meanwhile, she wonders what she should do and if she can do anything alone. Suddenly, she regains consciousness, and looking up, the protagonist was in front of her. Pointing her sword, she asks who he is, because she will defeat him. But meanwhile, in her mind, she begs the boy to leave, because in the end, she doesn't want to hurt him, and soon after he wonders about where the necklace he is looking for was. While the boy dodges the blows, he supposes it could be inside the armor. Soon after, he tries to strike Wazoo. Nimishima trembles, but then her brother asks her to look closely because the boy was literally unharmed. Our boy is surprised, saying it's expected from the princess. Advancing towards her, he states that now it's his turn to attack. When she tries to strike, the boy easily dodges and then grabs her sword with his hand, removing her armor. Even so, he managed to find the necklace, saying it's not so bad, and suits her. Without wasting time, the protagonist breaks it, and the curse is lifted. Narlina thinks the bad feeling was leaving her body and then falls into the protagonist's arms, but something is different with her. Wondering why her body is heating up, oh boy, things are getting different now. Wazoo, not understanding anything, asks if she's okay, to which she responds that she regained her consciousness, thanking him for saving her. The protagonist wants to know if something is wrong, and she says it's her first time being hugged by a man, so it's not such a bad feeling, and besides, she wants to know his name. Meanwhile, Nimishima and Miyar were furious, but still happy because their sister had returned to normal. In this, Marilena apologizes for making them worry, and her brother says it applies to him too because now that they're back to normal, they should be happy. The girl says that's exactly it, and then finally, the siblings were united. Wazoo just gives a look, and soon after Nimishima calls for him, saying she's very happy for bringing her sister back to normal. However, she doesn't think it was very good for them to be hugging, and now she's jealous. Hearing this, our hero feels very sad, asking if he's going to be accused of disrespectful conduct against royalty, but she says that's not the case, because she simply hadn't done the same thing yet. And in this, her brother asks her to calm down, because Wazoo only held her, so she wouldn't fall afterward. Marilena says that's exactly it, but still, it wasn't a bad idea. Nimishima gets all embarrassed and supposes that the two had their interests coinciding it, mentioning that some time ago she had given a teddy bear to Nimishima, and Naralina ended up wanting it too, so they ended up fighting. While they were fighting over it, from that day on, he started giving the same things to both of them. Hearing this, the protagonist gets a rough idea of what was happening, and Navilio says that this time there's only one person. Man, I can already see there's going to be a couple's fight now. Naralina asks not to worry because she won't take Wazoo away from her because they're not children anymore. Also because they have already learned what to do when that happens because they'll simply share. Wazoo meanwhile was trembling. The boy can't take it anymore. In this, the two ask at the same time for Wazoo to be their man. He didn't understand anything, and Navilio says that's a very good way to resolve things peacefully. Wow, even the brother agreed. My God. Changing the subject, he warns that their father should wake up from his sleep at any moment and would be happy to hear all this news. Narlina asks the protagonist to speak casually with her, forcing him to say her name several times. Changing the subject, she apologizes for scaring all the maids. Without wasting time, Wazoo tells Naralina for everyone to go quickly to where their parents are unconscious. On the other side of the castle, everyone was in the room where the father and mother of the three siblings were. Nimanisha says her healing magic isn't working, and Navilio states he thought there would be some change now that their curses had been broken. There is also no curse tool, wondering what it could be. Soon after, the rest of the group appears, and Orlando is pleased. Novello asks if he is a friend of the protagonist, who responds that this man is the one who had accompanied him during his journey. He is a very skilled person, and hoped he could make him a knight. Then Cassie says they know the cause of the two cursed tools that were on them, but they don't know why the kings are unconscious. In that case, they brought the guildmaster to take a look. Suddenly she appears and says, "Boy, she's quite strong if you know what I mean. What's this?" Our boy, all nervous, says he's a rank C adventurer, and the girl, named Relia, says she heard a lot about him from Orlando but couldn't believe it. At this, the protagonist takes out his guild card, saying this is the badge Reagan had given him. Relia says the guild card doesn't seem to be fake, and that her idiot brother must trust him. Introducing herself, she says she's the head of the Adventurers Guild at the headquarters in the east of the royal capital. Once again, she warns that she heard a lot about him from Orlando, and now that he saved Novilio and Naralina, in other words, his rank doesn't represent his strength. After all, there's no way a rank C adventurer could literally defeat one of the knights and protect the royalty. Even without having seen the great power of an adventurer with her own eyes and not knowing what tricks they use, he is a very precious person to a guild master. Hearing this, the boy gets all shy and, while thanking her, wonders if she was praising him or not. Soon after, she asks how the situation was, and Nimanisha says they've been unconscious for a long time, asking if she knows anything about this condition. Relia says she's seen a lot before, but she's worried about what this could be. One possibility is that it's caused by some kind of magical drug, but not one publicly known. To put it more simply, it's an ancient magical drug that was lost a long time ago. Oh boy, I can already see there's nothing good there, huh? Even she doesn't know anything about it, as it's so powerful that the cause can't be identified, so instead of a curse, it might have been caused by a drug. Then, hearing this, Naralina gets really angry, saying it's not possible it was caused by a drug, and her parents will remain unconscious forever, and the guild leader states the easiest way is to find the culprit and find a way to undo his magic. Nimanisha, however, warns that it would be very difficult because even the culprit hasn't been found, and Relia says that even if they found them, it's not guaranteed they would tell the truth. If only they knew someone who had knowledge that surpassed the knowledge of the ages, they might have found something. Hearing this, right? Our hero has an idea and then asks Miar how long Ragnar has been alive. So in that case, they would have to ask him personally. Poor old dragon, never gets any peace. A few minutes later, in Tata's carriage, she says it's quite strange to ask this kind of thing to a harem candidate. Salona says she had said she was a service girl, and Tata affirms, but never get it on purpose. If Wazoo allows her into his harem, her body and soul will be completely his. And then Salona said the two met many times in that place for adults. In that case, they've done that many times. Poor thing, she's getting all red. Hearing this, Tata gets excited, saying she's right because Wazoo threw her on the bed with force while playing. Oh boy, the girl doesn't even lie. Salona freezes on the spot, but Tata denies the story, stating that the MC didn't touch her at all. Hugging the girl, she says she's very cute, so she couldn't help but tease her. Relieved, Salona says she's happy to hear that. After all, she was worried about being left behind. Changing the subject, Tata wants to know how close she is to Wazoo, asking if she at least showed her body, but the elf replies no. Thinking better, there was a time when the MC saw her bumper while she was bathing. Then Tata mentions that Wazoo has seen her the same way, and Salona says they're even. The funniest thing is that the kid didn't lay a finger on them. Salona, however, says that Wazoo probably avoids relationships because he is a very good person. Hearing that, Tata says that if that's the case, they should try to seduce him when they meet him again. Still, the elf doesn't want to, after all. It's not the woman who should make the first move. There's also the fact of being inexperienced and even more so being a pure person. Suddenly the girl hugs Salona, saying it's amazing she devotes her body to the MC because if Wazoo wished, she would do the same. In this case, she is also quite inexperienced, as she fears disappointing him, and it has nothing to do with experience or technique, because it's just a very beautiful thing. Now that she doesn't have this opportunity anymore, she envies her a lot. Then, Salona says that if that's the case, that's all she needs to show her love to the MC. Tata, surprised, is happy, asking not to worry, because Wazoo will surely love them and treat them with great care. Man, look at this guy's luck, dude. Evit thinks she breaks the mood, right? Saying she has to do some studies on plus 18 things, so she's going to teach them. Meanwhile, poor Nenya had heard the whole conversation, wondering how long this mess will continue. These people are hopeless. On the other side of the country, Wazoo finally arrived at the dragon's house, so he will be able to ask someone if they know about an ancient magical drug. Obviously right, they were talking about Mir's parents who lived for a long time. He's still not sure why, but he thinks it will be easier to ask Ragnir than his two goddesses, and meanwhile, the poor things were listening to everything. A little later, Wazoo finishes climbing the mountain, but there's something different because there are more people there. The group itself was calling for Ragnir, and then the protagonist appears asking who they are. Suddenly, the monster's expressions change, and everyone says it's him who has to answer that question, and why there's a human there. In that, right, Wazoo says he's a friend of Ragnir, but then the creatures get more stressed because they four are the dragon's best friends. The monster, which I think is a lion or something, tries to lift the kid, but of course they can't, right? The boy is too strong. Hearing this, the rest of the creatures recognize it as a challenge, and everyone tries to hit the protagonist. A little later, there was Ragnir laughing a lot, saying he was wondering why there was so much noise and it seems they are getting along well. Recently made friends with Wazoo and introducing the protagonist to them says they are his longtime friends, including they are called the peaks of the mountain creatures, and hearing this, the other monster asks to stop with these things. They had been defeated like that by a human, so they shouldn't be called the peaks of the creatures. And hearing all this, Wazoo stays quiet in the corner. Soon after, Ragnir says it's no exaggeration to say that Wazoo is the strongest in the world because he can even lift and throw him away with ease. Hearing this, everyone even changes their way of acting, saying that if he's a friend of Ragnir, he's also a friend of theirs. Seeing what was happening, the protagonist is surprised because suddenly they became very kind. Then Ragnir introduces them, saying the lion is called Game, the werewolf is Zir, the elf next to him is called Ruto, and the necromancer is called Neil. Hearing this, the protagonist is surprised, asking what a high elf is. The guy states it's a good question, and it's true that his race is that of a high elf, but his heart is different. To tell the truth, it's because he loves elves a lot, and because of that, he laid hands on every elf in his village, and as a result, was expelled from that place. To sum up, elves are pure and devoted and still have that powerful armament, if you know what I mean. The difference between the nobility of elves is very big, and if he could, he would want to do a lot of things with all the elves in the world. Wow, man, this is getting a bit inappropriate, huh? Finally, he loves doing all this kind of thing, and soon after, an awkward silence fills the air. A few minutes later, Wazoo says he got distracted by that excited guy and forgot about everything, but he wanted to ask Ragnir a question. A little later, the dragon heard the whole story, and, in this case, should discuss it with Neil. Wazoo asks if he's a necromancer, and he, answering yes, states that living a long life is his only saving grace. According to what the protagonist said, there is a high chance it is a magical drug, but it could also be the effect of an enchantment. It's quite difficult to say without having seen it, because both magical drugs and enchantments need to be cancelled in the correct way. Otherwise, it could end up causing problems. Hearing this, Wazoo asks if there can't be a cure or something like that, because he can't return with just this information. However, Neil states that he can't give him any recipe without thinking. Moreover, he doesn't have any items, and if he could return to his laboratory, he might be able to make something useful, and Wazoo says they should go there, but Neil warns that it's too far for a human. Then, Ragnir says it seems Neil still doesn't understand how strong Wazoo is. The kid, with a smile on his face, says they should return as quickly as they can, so he goes to Neil's house and can hardly wait to reach Manbonde by tomorrow morning at his pace. At this, the monster, who is a necromancer, asks what would happen if he suddenly appeared in a human city. He would probably be stoned and return completely traumatized, the poor creature crying, while Wazoo thinks he has no confidence as a monster. Neil says he could also be attacked by soldiers or sealed by mages, asking what he will do if that happens. And Wazoo says he is a superior creature of this mountain. He really doesn't know why he's worrying about everything, and if he's really not a bad person, then he will be by his side. If something like that happens, he will protect him, so he shouldn't worry, even though he recently met the prince and princesses and wants to help them. If the king and queen could wake up and the family members were together, there would surely be pleasant smiles on their faces. After pleading so much for the creature's help, he says that if he's willing to go that far, he will find a way to help him. Still, there is a condition, because he has to find a skeleton with a beautiful clavicle, as it's about time he had a partner. Hearing this, everyone was silent, but then the protagonist, even though it's funny, agrees. Sometime later, the protagonist finally arrived in the city, and the skeleton thanks him for carrying him there, but it was so fast that it almost left his bones broken. Changing the subject, the protagonist says they will meet the soldiers at the back entrance to reach the royal capital. There are many guards to protect him, but it's better to hide his face because he might end up scaring others. Meanwhile, Orlando from afar was watching the protagonist, feeling happy that he had returned. He is now an apprentice knight and Navilio had given him special training. Looking at the person next to him, Wazoo then says he is a necromancer and knows a lot about magical drugs, so he brought him there. There's no need to worry at all because he is not a suspicious person. Also because if anything happens, he will just end his race while the kid is not messing around her. A few minutes later, everyone enters the castle and Wazoo introduces the necromancer. Navilio, approaching, thanks Neil for his help, who responds that he was quite surprised to have approached without any fear, but it's expected of a prince. Even so, Navilio says he was a bit scared because even being Wazoo's friend, it was the first time he was meeting the necromancer. However, he is an intellectual person, proving that his concerns are just unfounded fears, and the monster says it's only because he was suppressing his intimidating aura. This is a skill that can only be used after some time of achieving this appearance because normal necromancers can't do that. At this, Wazoo asks if he was lying when he was scared of the soldiers and the dogs, and the poor thing, trembling with fear, affirms it's true. Meanwhile, the guild leader was observing the necromancer, asking if by any chance he is the Mage King Neil. Surprised, Wazoo asks if by any chance he is a very famous person. Relia says that when it comes to him, they say he has the ability to use any type of magic and that his magical power is enormous, where he would be capable of destroying an entire country with ease. To sum it up, he's an absolute legend, man, and isn't the creature something else? The necromancer starts laughing and says she's right, and that name, Mage King, brings him a lot of old memories because there's still someone who calls him by that name. Getting closer, he says she's a very intelligent woman, and the girl says it's because she's the guild master of this country. A little later, Neil was there analyzing the kings, saying that there was something very rare that had been used on them, and without a doubt, it was a magical drug, probably the effect of the eternal sleep drug. Nemenisha asks if it would be possible to wake them with her magic, and the monster says it's not impossible, but it's a very strong method. If they wake them using force, who knows what could happen to their bodies, and that said, if they do nothing, they will sleep until death. It's better to follow the correct way to wake them, and for that, they need to make a certain cancellation drug. At this, Navilio asks how they can make it, and the necromancer says he can make it easily. Still, there's a very important ingredient missing, which is a vampire's fang. Obviously, he wants to use this item only as a catalyst, so there will be no risk of their parents turning into vampires. Navilio, however, warns that it's not easy to find a vampire, but Neil says he knows of a place. However, it's an old memory, so he doesn't know if there are still vampires there, and Wazoo quickly says that if it's a possibility, then he'll take a look. Hearing this, the two get all excited, and then throw themselves at the protagonist, asking him to quickly say where the place is. After all, the two will go too. Wow, I can already see that nothing good will come of this, huh? Wazoo, all awkward, says they are princesses, so they can't go. However, one knows how to use barrier magic, and the other is the best with the sword skill in the country. Currently, it's the best chance to save their parents, so they can't just stay there doing nothing. Navilio was just watching all this and then asks if Wazoo could do them this favor and take them with him. As they had said, they need to do something for their parents and can understand their feelings. Hearing this, as there's no other way, Wazoo says it's not very far, so he'll take them. Then, Halaya says that Wazoo is an interesting person because, besides being a friend of the Dragon King, he's a rank C adventurer who got very close to the royal family. Meanwhile, Wazoo hears everything thinking about what would happen if they also knew that the Dragon King is his partner too. At this, the girl mentions that if he manages to resolve all this mess, she'll promote him to rank B, and then Wazoo gets all excited. To be honest, she could promote him even to rank A, but it would be problematic to do that suddenly, and in this case, he'll take Naralina and Nemenisha with him. A few minutes later, the princesses apologize for taking so long, and Wazoo, looking back, sees that everyone was equipped. They need to hide their identities since they are leaving for the royal capital. Besides, even being from the royal family, they are not weak, so they don't mind camping outdoors. Hearing this, the protagonist was fine, but then he starts thinking about some peculiar things, right? A few days later, it had been a long time since Wazoo's group left the country. Nemenisha says she doesn't like the idea of leaving her country, and Naralina says she had left her home to find a way to cure them. However, the girl says it was because of Floyd, Kumia, and Cassie, who helped a lot. Still, everything she did was for her family. Meanwhile, our hero was defeating a bunch of monsters, asking them not to worry because he promises to do his best so they could have a smooth journey. It's been a few hours since they left the country, and thinking that it's still midday and, judging by the speed of the horses, it seemed they would only arrive tomorrow. Before, he was considering defeating the vampire alone and bringing its fang, and if that's the case, he could return to the kingdom still at night. In the middle of this situation, it's still bad because he ended up preparing only one tent, so they might end up having to sleep huddled together. Anyway, it's not a problem because he can sleep in a tree at night, and soon after Nimanishi asks if Wazoo ever thought about learning to ride a horse. No need to be embarrassed about not knowing, and Wazoo says he never had the opportunity to learn. Then, Naralina states that if that's the case, she'll teach him, asking him to ride in front. Her sister Nervous asks if that's what she was planning, and the girl stays there with that smug smile. Then, Nimanishi puts the horse in front, saying that even if she's her sister, she won't allow her to take advantage. At this, the two start arguing, and the poor protagonist is left behind. Even so, it doesn't matter because he has Maya by his side, but she suddenly leaves his shoulder and goes into the middle of the argument too. The boy falls to the ground, feeling disheartened, thinking he's under so much pressure traveling with two princesses and even being alone. In moments like this, the only thing to do is practice seated gymnastics, which he learned from his sister. I don't understand anything anymore. Soon after, the two sisters return, saying they had finished discussing. The one responsible for teaching him will be Naralina, and right behind her, her sister. First of all, she can only teach the basics due to the limited time, but there's a big difference from knowing nothing. In this, Nimanishi asks them to do their best because she will be responsible tomorrow. Meanwhile, Wazoo thinks he still doesn't understand the situation, but it's okay as long as they continue teaching him. However, a while later, the boy burned his tongue, looking like a 2-year-old child riding a horse. Trembling at the core, he thinks the way Naralina is touching him is very dangerous. Meanwhile, Nimanishi and Mir are watching the situation with jealousy. Our boy, however, is trying to concentrate, thinking that she is the princess. In this case, someone like him can't have any feelings for her, and suddenly, the girl touches the protagonist. A while later, Nimanishi announces that it's getting dark, so they should take a break. Taking advantage of the conversation, Wazoo mentions that regarding the vampire fang, he wanted to make a suggestion, thinking it would be easy to say he could get the fang back with him, but the journey would become meaningless after walking for so long. Above all, it's like saying he doesn't trust them. Surely the two are aware that this journey is not child's play. In this, the boy couldn't bring himself to tell the truth, saying he just has to do his best. A little later, the group was gathering some ingredients to make a meal, and Wazoo was having fun. Since he wants to have a harem, he has to get used to traveling with girls. Suddenly, they start talking about shampoo, and Naralina asks if Wazoo has ever heard of conditioner. The protagonist says he has no idea what those things are, and Naralina explains they are items to take care of his hair. In this, Nimanishi mentions that the hair looks very good even after a whole day of traveling. Our hero asks if he can take a look, and then smells her hair. Saying it's very nice, the girl gets embarrassed and then thanks him. Changing the subject, Naralina says it might be a bit early to ask this, questioning what he will do after resolving all this matter, and Wazoo says he is currently traveling with Mir around Mindland, so he should be somewhere else afterward. In this, Nimanishi is surprised, asking if he won't stay in Mambonde, and Naralina warns that he is an adventurer, so they can't make him change his mind. The girl questions the reason for all this, and if it's to become stronger, and Wazoo says he just wants to help people who are in trouble. To sum up, his main start of this journey is literally to build a harem, and hearing this, the two fall silent. A while later, Nimanishi says that Wazoo is so sure of their status that he distanced himself, and Naralina affirms they need the boy so they could become companions or true women. They won't be able to stay by his side for long because he said he wanted to create a harem, but the case will be different if he starts to like them. Soon after, Naralina asks her sister if she likes the protagonist. The girl gets all embarrassed, and then Naralina thinks they will wake their parents from their sleep, so she wanted them to give her their strength to deal with this. A few minutes later, the sisters open the tent, and Wazoo was there sleeping. As they had promised, they won't go back on their word, and lying in bed, they stay there cuddled with him. Soon after, our hero wakes up and, looking to the side, doesn't understand anything that was happening. There are literally two princesses clinging to each of his arms. In the midst of this, he wonders if he was being seduced, and moreover, is a man supposing what could happen if he fell into this game. It's not like he hasn't seen a woman that way, and soon after, he remembers Tata and Salona, wondering if he's living a super blessed life. And currently, his harem only has Mir. Looking at it this way, then he could say he's a lucky man because Naval entrusted him with the responsibility of his sisters. It's his duty to take them back safely, so he shouldn't worry. A few hours later, it was already daytime, and the protagonist wakes up all happy. Looking back, he says the weather was very nice, and meanwhile, the two sisters were embarrassed because nothing happened all night. A little later, the group finally arrived at the cave where Neil had said there was a vampire. As expected, there were a lot of bats there, and a little further ahead, there was also a house. Hearing some noises, they realized there was someone using a hoe. There was a guy tending to his plantation saying he was feeling very good early in the day. At that moment, the three break expectations because the vampire is quite different from what they thought. Soon after, the vampire says the vegetables seem to be very healthy, and at this rate, when someone named arrives, he can serve a lot of delicious dishes. Looking to the side, the man notices there are other people, and Nimanisha asks if, by any chance, he is a vampire. Everyone starts staring at each other, then suddenly the vampire becomes all embarrassed, asking why they didn't mention there were girls there. The poor guy runs to his house all desperate, and the three think that, as expected, the creature is really different from the type of vampire they expected. Marilena says that, if she's not mistaken, vampires really hate sunlight, but that one is all tanned. In that case, they should talk to him to see if they can get any information about vampires. Suddenly, the monster opens the door again and has a completely different expression, asking if they came to kill him. His name is Ryu, and in the name of death, he is the vampire who will kill them. Everyone is surprised, and then there's that awkward silence in the air. Even now that he's like that, they had seen him in another way, so they don't feel tense anymore. The monster then becomes all sad, apologizing, so Nimanisha suggests that if everything is okay, they should calm down and start over. The vampire agrees, and the protagonist says they will start from the cave door. A few minutes later, the group goes back there again, asking where the vampire was because they need to catch their prey at all costs. With the mansion in front of them, they must move forward, and suddenly, the vampire appears, but the poor guy ends up coughing. Recovering, they ask if he can do it again, but Wazoo is totally disappointed. Then, they do the same thing a bunch of times that I even lost count. Every time something went wrong, but the creature didn't give up because he needs to do this for the dignity of being a monster. Suddenly, Wazoo loses his patience and punches the vampire in the face, who is now short on ideas. The poor guy bows on the ground, apologizing because he had just gotten married, begging not to be killed. At that moment, the MC says they didn't come there to kill him, but Rio was so shocked that he just asked them not to come closer. Anyway, the boys' group went there to catch a vampire's prey, so they don't want his life. Hearing this, the vampire becomes suspicious because the claws, flesh, and wings of a vampire are very valuable, but he only wants his fangs. Soon after, Naralina informs that they need the fangs for medicinal purposes, and if he gives them, they will give something as a gift. Rio says that if they are not going to kill him, he doesn't need any reward, and removing his tooth, says he is happy if it is something so useful. Wow, it was that easy. Tying a rhythm, he places it in a box as if it were a Christmas present, and seeing this, the three say nothing. Handing over the item, the MC then asks if he is okay with this sunlight because normally vampires become very weak when exposed like that. The vampire, however, affirms that yes, if he were exposed without any protection, he would be turned to ashes. But he overcame all that with his hard work and is dealing with the sun calmly, and Nimanisha, surprised, thinks that you can't change that much just with that. The house also seems very old, and maybe has been there for a long time or even its form has changed. Then, Wazoo asks why he lives there, and with the vampire saying it would be a long story, suddenly everyone runs away. At that moment, the vampire becomes very sad, warning that it won't take long, so they should listen to his story. Poor guy, I even feel sorry now. It's been a long time since he met anyone besides someone named Anini, and he would like to talk a little more because, in fact, he is a weak vampire who is afraid of dying. Soon after, the three start discussing because Ryu seems very lonely, so they will have to at least hear his whole story. A few minutes later, the vampire says he has been there for so long that he forgot to count the days and, since no one goes there, he is completely alone. Wazoo asks about this Amini, who says she visits him sometimes, but even so, he feels alone. When he enters the coffin, he has to sleep, but when they went there today, they were quite happy. Poor guy, really. Hearing this, Naralina asks why he doesn't go see where Imini is, but he says that if he could do that, he wouldn't be there. From what the group saw, there is no barrier there, and Rio says there is something that has the same effect. At that moment, they remember there were a lot of bats in the cave, asking if it has anything to do with it. Then the vampire says yes, because in the end, he is afraid of bats. So the video ends here. If you don't want to miss the next part, activate the notification bell, and see you next time.